TV, radio, or online every morning. It's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and tune-in apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Good afternoon, everybody. You're with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News. And coming up, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex have unleashed on the royal family. Yet again, Harry and Meghan have used their Netflix documentary to hurl more damaging allegations at his nearest and dearest, only a matter of months after our Queen's death. We will be reacting to all of this throughout the show. Slight caveat, I haven't watched a single second of it deliberately, and I deliberately, actually, sorry to everyone who's broadcast before me on GB News, have ignored it because I just didn't need it in my life. But here we go. Plus, American woman Ann Sokoulas is due to be sentenced today. That's after she pleaded guilty to causing Harry Dunn's death by careless driving. We will go live to the Old Bailey right here on this show, bring you all of the latest as that happens. And the government has defended its decision to open the first UK coal mine for 30 years, saying it's still intent on phasing out coal, but needs must at the end of the day. So what do locals in Cumbria actually make of this new mine? Our reporter Ellie Costello has been finding out. We've got all of that for you. The strike's latest, of course. And what on earth is going on as we try to solve our massive asylum seeker backlog? GB Views at gbnews.uk. Get those views coming in when it comes to Harry and Meghan. We can't ignore it, can we? I'll be back after the latest headlines.
Patrick, thank you. Good afternoon. It's 2 minutes past 3. I'm Rhiannon Jones in the GB newsroom. Waiting lists for routine NHS treatment in England have hit a record high, and A&E performances are now at a record low. According to the NHS, 7.2 million people were waiting to start routine treatment at the end of October, and just 67% of A&E patients were seen within 4 hours of being admitted. Ambulance response times have improved, but are still more than 40 minutes behind the target time of 18 minutes. GP David Lloyd says the pandemic exposed long-term problems with the NHS.
We're dealing with nurses who are earning less than they did 10 years ago, whereas the private sector are earning way more. You're dealing with a system that has reached a crisis. And COVID was a brief moment when, we had a terrible time, but I'm afraid it opened up the wounds of the NHS that have been sitting there for several years.
The The government has defended its decision to open the first UK coal mine in 30 years, saying it still intends on phasing out coal. The Levelling Up Secretary has given planning permission for the new colliery in Whitehaven in Cumbria. Former COP26 President Alok Sharma has labelled the decision a backward step for UK climate action, but Michael Gove says it will create hundreds of jobs. The royal family is denying claims they were approached to comment on allegations made in the Duke and Duchess of Sussex Netflix series. Senior palace sources say neither Buckingham Palace, Kensington Palace nor members of the royal family were contacted before the launch. That contradicts a statement made at the start of the documentary, which claims they declined to comment. In the programme, Harry accuses the royal family of a huge level of unconscious bias, and the couple say they want to challenge misinformation.
In this family, sometimes, you're part of the problem rather than part of the solution. And there is a huge level of unconscious bias. The thing with unconscious bias is it's actually no one's fault. But once it's been pointed out or identified within yourself, you then need to make it right. It's education, it's awareness, and it's a constant work in progress for everybody, including me.
The Home Secretary has confirmed the military is set to replace striking border force workers. People hoping to travel over the Christmas period are being warned of cancellations and delays over the 8 days of action from the 23rd of December to New Year's Eve. Rail workers, postal staff, nurses and paramedics are also planning to strike in the coming weeks. Suella Braverman says protecting the UK's borders is the #1 priority.
Well, we have been preparing for the prospects of border force strikes for some time now. We've been analysing what the impact of a shortfall of operational personnel on our border will be. We've got plans in place that will involve, to a degree, bringing in some of our military colleagues to help us in a variety of roles. And we want to, ultimately, I'm not willing to compromise on security at the border. That's the #1 priority.
The US and Russia have exchanged jailed American basketball player Brittany Griner for a notorious Russian arms dealer. Victor Bout has been held in a US prison for 12 years. Ms. Griner was arrested at a Moscow airport back in February for possessing cannabis oil. Last July, the Biden administration proposed a prisoner exchange. Well, President Joe Biden says Griner is safe and on a plane home from Abu Dhabi, where the swap took place.
People all across the country have learned about Brittany's story, advocated for her release, stood with her throughout this terrible ordeal. And I know that support meant a lot to her family. I'm glad to be able to say that Brittany's in good spirits. She's relieved to finally be heading home. And the fact remains that she's lost months of her life, experienced the needless trauma, and she deserves space, privacy, and time with her loved ones to recover and heal.
And the Shadow Chancellor has told industry chiefs that Labour's back in business at a party conference. Rachel Reeves has unveiled plans to make the UK the high-growth start-up hub of the world. In front of a few hundred business leaders in London's Canary Wharf, she spoke of Labour's plans for economic growth.
Britain can achieve so much in innovation, in trade and in growth. We have the ability. But we need government and business working together to make the most of that great potential, to spread opportunity far and wide right across the country, and to allow everyone with the talent, the effort and the ideas to see their vision through to reality.
This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens now, though. It's back to Patrick.
OK, everyone, I want to just level with you straight away. I haven't watched a single minute of the Harry and Meghan docuseries on Netflix, not a second of it. Now, we're going to be talking about proper news on this show, the strike action, the cost of living crisis and how we're going to tackle illegal immigration. And I'm across all of the detail of all of that stuff. And I know that we're also going to be talking a lot about Harry and Meghan. And I've made my feelings clear about Whinge and Ginge in the past. It's a big story. And as a broadcaster, there's usually no excuse for not doing my research on a topic before I come to air and discuss it. But I had a choice today. I had a choice to wake up and deliberately spend hours of my life watching something I knew would make me very, very angry, or crack on with my day in blissful ignorance and actually be happy with my life. I chose happiness. I've seen enough. I've seen Harry grow up. I've seen him get married. I've seen the woman he married shamelessly use her title for self-promotion. I've seen them cry into Oprah's cleavage, accuse the royals and all of us of racism. I've seen them make the Queen and Prince Philip's lives miserable. I've seen them try to overshadow the good that Prince William and Kate tried to do. I've seen them be rampant hypocrites, taking private jets around the world while lecturing us on the climate crisis. I've seen them try to destroy our royal family and tarnish Britain's reputation on the world stage. I have seen enough. So I, like many of you watching and listening to this show right now, will be reacting to the various clips that I am no doubt going to have to endure of this documentary. I'll be reacting to them live on air, which means I can now legitimately use the excuse that the only reason I am engaging with Harry and Meghan's multi-million-pound sellout of our royal family is because I am, quite literally, paid to be here. So, with that said, let's crack on. Joining me now are two royal experts, journalist and broadcaster Jenny Bond and Ingrid Seward, editor of Majesty magazine. Jenny, I will start with you. You're going to have to educate me. The top lines of what we've seen so far from Harry and Meghan's Netflix interjection.
Well, do you know what? It was all rather underwhelming, I think. I have, in fact, spent 3 hours of my life this morning looking at it all. And, you know, if in these times of crisis and cost of living and the rest of it, we are interested in the minutiae of a charming love story, then this is for you. But what we learned was how they met and how he was late on the first date, etc., underpinned by a simmering resentment against all the media, on both sides of the Atlantic, actually, and a lot of talk about race and racial bias and unconscious bias, which I respect, that he has signed that up. I think it is an important topic. But as for explosive revelations or attacks on the royal family, no, they weren't really there.
One would expect that perhaps that is to come, though. Ingrid, your hot take on what we've seen so far. Do you think they're rolling the wicket for something more serious?
Well, I think they're really playing the race card because that seems to be their modus operandi for all this, apart from trying to slightly changing their love story. I think one of the newspapers that they hate, The Sun, has rolled out 5 inconsistencies. So it all makes, as Jenny said, it all makes quite fun reading when the rest of the news is so depressing. So I think that they're building up to the last series when they're going to attack the palace and the people that work there for being racist. And Harry says, well, you know, unconditional racism he talks about. Don't go to sleep, Patrick.
No. I'm not. It's just. I'm just wondering. Go on.
Harry talks about unconditional racism, and he then says that he was actually at fault because he lived within a bubble, and he didn't think he was racist, but the very fact that he didn't think he was racist or didn't notice anything about it meant that he was racist. So their message is muddled. One thing I did find quite interesting is that Meghan is very anxious to let us know how intelligent she is. Right. And she obviously is. But for an intelligent woman, she seemed to be very, very remarkably so unaware of what she was marrying into.
Yes.
And for someone that's used to reading scripts and doing films and doing television, you'd think she would have studied the royal family a little bit before she actually took the step to marry into them. So I find that very odd.
Well, it's almost unbelievable, isn't it, Ingrid? It's almost unbelievable that somebody could be so unaware both of themselves and indeed the family that they're going to marry into. Jenny, you said that it was a little bit underwhelming. Perhaps this is a good thing for Harry, because if this was absolutely, completely and utterly 100% bombshell, then there would be no way back to him after what many people may come to regard as the inevitable divorce.
Yeah, but, you know, I don't think they want a way back. They're very happy in the life that they've got out there. What I'd like to know is why they've done this. The first trailer opened with, why are you making this documentary? We still haven't really got the answer to that beyond Meghan saying, well, people might like to hear it from our own mouths. Well, yeah, some people might. But I agree on the lack of knowledge that Meghan showed. She was astonished she had to curtsy to the Queen. She had to learn the national anthem. Well, no, that's fair enough. She didn't know what a walkabout was. But when she did do that walkabout, and this is what is quite confusing, I think, the first walkabout in Nottingham, on her first appearance, she was fated as a breath of fresh air. And Harry says that in the documentary, that she was brilliant at this job. She was perfect for the role. And I thought, wow, this woman can do it. And you know what? I think she could have done it if they had just stuck to it. But they didn't understand, apparently, that this was a hierarchy and that they were not going to be the boss.
Yes, indeed. Now, Ingrid, Harry talks a lot about unconscious bias from what I've gleaned off Twitter anyway. Do you think there is just a whiff of a man here who's trying to distance himself from the fact that he did at one point in his life go out wearing a Nazi uniform?
Well, Harry's done a few other sort of what you could call racist things, but I think he does say that, you know, it was the worst thing he felt he'd ever done, and he was deeply, deeply sorry. It took him a long time to recover from that, and I think, you know, basically we have to forgive him for that. You know, he was young and crazy, and he thought it would be funny. And he really paid for his mistake, I feel, because, you know, he lost respect of a lot of people globally because of that. So I don't think there's too much to read in that. But Harry sort of kind of admits that he was an unconscious racist simply because he didn't know any better. I think that's what he's trying to say. Sometimes it's really difficult to understand what either of them are trying to say.
Well, this is part of it. Look, both of you, thank you very, very much, and a good way to kick off the show. You have educated me on exactly maybe the ground of this. I'm going to have to talk about this for quite a while. I know it just piqued the interest of a lot of people. Look, thank you very much. Jenny, I believe you're back. You're going to be coming back. Thank you. Right, OK. Jenny Bond there, journalist and broadcaster, and Ingrid Seward, editor of Majesty magazine. Royalty in their own rights, actually. What a fantastic... My kind of royals. My kind of royals, not people who just use the title for shameless self-promotion. Anyway, well, as we were discussing, there was a lot on race in the news series. Oh, good. OK, so over the course of this show, I am going to be watching clips of this for the first time, along with many of you, and listening to them. So here's the first taste of things to come. Let's have it.
What people need to understand is, as far as a lot of the family were concerned, everything that she was being put through, they had been put through as well. So it was almost like a rite of passage. And some of the members of the family was like, right, but my wife had to go through that. So why should your girlfriend be treated any differently? Why should you get special treatment? Why should she be protected? And I said the difference here is the race element.
OK, that's interesting. A couple of things wrapped up in that, aren't there? There is the women in the royal family issue, and I am not diminishing whatsoever. In fact, it's impossible to diminish what it must be like. Look at Diana and Fergie and Kate as well. Just this idea now that you are in a very, very structured family. By definition, that's what the royal family is. I, unlike Harry, am not surprised that there is a hierarchy in the royal family. However, if you're a woman, maybe there's a woman's role in that. I know people will be shouting at it now, going, well, we had a queen for years. Yeah, slightly different, though. Slightly different. But I suppose he's raised that race element on top of it. It must be incredibly difficult to be followed around by paparazzi for, you know, a lot of your life, and that must be very, very tricky. But I don't know. Anyway, let's cross now to our royal reporter, Cameron Walker, who's watching it for us in the GB News Royal Reaction Room. Cameron, I did my best. Some would call it being incredibly unprofessional, but I did my best to try to distance myself initially from the Meghan and Harry documentary. Is it correct that we've sent you and numerous others to a cinema so you can watch all of this stuff all day? Have we really put you through this?
You have indeed, Patrick. Yes, I feel like I should get the popcorn out, shouldn't I? I've been here since 8 o'clock this morning watching the first 3 episodes which have aired of this Netflix series involving Harry and Meghan. Now, we just saw a clip there of Prince Harry alluding to the fact that he felt that people within Buckingham Palace were not kind of surprised about the treatments which he perceives Meghan was getting from the press, and they said to him that other female members of the royal family who have married into the royal family got the same treatments, and therefore essentially Meghan should suck it up, get on with it, and it would eventually get better. Well, I'm joined now by royal historian Rafe Hadel-Manku, who has also watched this Netflix documentary. He's also been with me for a very long time now. Rafe, particularly on this race issue which Harry talks about, and the fact that People within Buckingham Palace, according to Prince Harry, felt that Meghan was not given any different treatment by the media to other female members of the royal family.
Well, look, in our contemporary culture, victimhood is venerated, if not revered. Victims are seen as good, virtuous people. And what we've got here in this documentary series is an attempt to portray both Harry and Meghan particularly as victims. They're victims of everything. They're victims of racism. They're victims of their families. They're victims of the media. They're victims of their upbringing, of the monarchy. They're victims even of Brexit. Can you believe it? You know, if master propagandists for centuries have had a golden rule: if you tell a lie long enough, people will believe it. And this is just merely the latest part of their game plan that we're seeing here, to try to convince the world that this pair of, pampered prima donnas are actually victims. And it's a complete lie. They're not speaking truth to power. They're speaking lies about power. And, this is quite a dull as dishwater documentary series, I have to say. But if it does win any award, it should be for Best Fantasy Series.
Well, that's quite a point that you made there. Rafe, you mentioned Brexit there, and there's a point in this documentary where they talk about the fact that we were in the fallout from the Brexit referendum of 2016. In November, I think it was 2017, when Harry and Meghan, it was announced that they had got engaged, and the anti-immigration rhetoric which the Netflix series believes happened back at that time, and how that played into the race row within the United Kingdom. And just before I get you to respond to that, and Patrick, you probably want to respond to this too, actually, we've got a clip from GB News' very own Nigel Farage, who has reacted to that specific point from a documentary.
Well, perhaps no great surprise that Harry and Meghan choose to use Brexit as one of the causes for the terrible racism that was put against them. They draw on extreme left-wing historians. They draw on fake news headlines from The Guardian and elsewhere. And what they're really saying is that 52% of Prince Harry's country of birth are bad, racist people. This is all about politics, ultimately, isn't it? This is all about short-term, make money out of dissing the royal family and the United Kingdom, and then long-term, give a political platform from which Meghan can launch her career in the USA. I have to say, I think in their actions, their behaviour towards their family and everybody else, they are nothing short of despicable.
From Harry and Meghan's perspective, clearly they feel like there was some kind of agenda against them, particularly with the race thing within the media and within British society. What's your take on that?
Well, I think it's quite a scurrilous accusation to make, and it's a slander against the 52% of Britons who actually voted for Brexit, to suggest that their vote was linked with racism and an anti-immigration stance. I mean, it seems quite clear that there's a complete lack of self-awareness on the part of Harry and Meghan to actually ask, have we actually done anything wrong in our tenure in the royal family? Is there anything we did that perhaps could have turned the British public against us? Because it's clear there was so much goodwill towards this couple at the beginning of their relationship. We saw that. The press coverage was remarkable. We saw in the long walk outside Windsor Castle, crowds lined there that we haven't seen even in the Mall, because the space there is so long. I was so enthusiastic that we had in Meghan, I called her a Heineken princess, a princess able to reach other parts that normal princesses can't reach, such as in the Commonwealth and so forth. We saw the royal family with open arms welcoming Meghan in. Meghan was the first a partner of a member of the royal who wasn't engaged, who the Queen invited to spend Christmas. Prince Charles recommended his favourite black choir to come and perform at the royal wedding. There was so much goodwill there. To try to suggest that racism or an anti-immigration stance lies at the heart of why things went sour, I think, is to completely miss the ball on this.
Yeah, well, there's certainly two sides to this story, isn't there? There seems to be this side, Buckingham Palace's side, and indeed what Harry and Meghan are saying and believe, and what Netflix has put out there in this documentary. Ray, for the moment, thank you. But on that theme of two sides to every story, we've been told by royal sources they insist that no attempt was made to try and get any kind of comment from Buckingham Palace or Kensington Palace, or indeed a member of the royal family, to react to this particular documentary. They say that Netflix, in the last hour, a source for Netflix has said that Buckingham Palace and Kensington Palace were contacted in advance and given the right to reply to claims within the series. Patrick, I think the British public are going to struggle to decide which side of this story to believe, because clearly there is two sides to this story.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, Cameron and Ray, thank you very, very much on doing stellar work there in that cinema. putting yourselves through, inflicting all of this upon you. Yeah, just a few bits and bobs to pick up on there very, very briefly, which is I think that maybe, just maybe, it might be easier for Meghan and Harry to assume that the reason why public sentiment turned against Meghan was race-related, as opposed to the fact that maybe people just don't like her and they think that maybe he's been got at. And, yeah, a bad look when it comes to the idea that just slamming 52% of the British population as racists. I mean, they may well be deciding that America is a bigger market, and I understand all of that, but the American market is significantly more fickle. And if they turn themselves into the Kardashians, they might have to suffer the same wrath, some of that. Right, we've got a little bit of breaking news for you now. Moving on, very much change of tone, ladies and gents, very much change of tone. Some breaking news for you. The number of children under the age of 15 who have died from invasive strep A, which is that illness that's doing the rounds at the moment in England, has risen to 13, sadly. The UK Health Security Agency has just said that, taking the UK total to 15. I think we'll get a little bit more detail on that, so it's risen to 15 now. You are with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News. Coming up, we are standing by for the sentence of American woman Ann Sekulas after she pleaded guilty to causing Harry Dunn's death by careless driving. We all remember that case, don't we? We'll go live to the Old Bailey as that happens. But before that, we're going to go to a very, very short break. Make sure you keep these views coming in, by the way. GBViews at GBnews.uk. I'm going to ask you if you have watched this Harry and Meghan stuff to do a lot of the heavy lifting for me today, because I have managed to avoid it like the plague, and I intend to do so as much as possible. GBViews at GBnews.uk. Your views, people. See you in a tip.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me! And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back, everybody. Now, lots of you have been getting in touch with your thoughts on the Sussexes. That's right. Yes, this is Richard. Yes, there is unconscious bias against Meghan, not because of her race, but because we all unconsciously recognise her personality. Yeah, this is part of it, isn't it? And I can't help but wonder, Richard, thank you very much, whether or not it's doing more to diminish genuine racism if indeed they can't really just accept the fact that people just don't like her. Maybe there's that. Anyway, Steph says, well done, Patrick. Hey, we chose happiness today too. Sick of the pair of them. All support to the real royals. Hope they keep their chins up and their dignity intact. And I actually feel incredibly sorry, Steph, for the real royals. And I'm glad you've called them that, because they are, right? Because one of the reasons why I feel sorry for them is because it's not really in their remit to comment on stuff, isn't it? I mean, they, by definition, try to maintain a relatively dignified silence unless they're absolutely backed into it. And what is fascinating is that even in the very creation of this Netflix docu-series, which, yes, I have not watched and don't intend to, but anyway, the Netflix have said, right, OK, well, we approached the royal family for comment, and the royal family said, no, you didn't. Well, I know who I believe there, frankly, because even in the trailers, which I did watch, for the Harry and Meghan stuff, it was very much a case of like, well, actually, that footage is not real, is it? That's from a Katie Price press pack, which I think is an odd choice for Harry and Meghan to have gone for. And then they had to come out, Netflix, and go, sorry, no, that trailer wasn't supposed to be taken literally. OK, well, you're already picking and choosing at this point, and bearing in mind some of the absolute demonstrable whoppers that Meghan and Harry told while they were crying into Oprah's bosom. I am absolutely convinced, I believe the royal family when they say that they weren't approached for comment on this particular piece, which does question the quality of journalism or presentation when it comes to it, doesn't it? Mark says, Harry has definitely lost his marbles with the stuff he is spewing. Feels sorry for him. He seems so mixed up and confused. Come back, pre-marriage Harry. Yes, I mean, we all loved Harry. I personally, although I think this does say more about me than anything else, I liked Harry when he was just falling out of nightclubs and was, you know, a bit of a lad, right? I did like that, apart from, yes, that time he wore something he shouldn't have worn, OK? But I liked that version of Harry because he was a bit of a lad, he was realistically never going to be king, and so he could kind of get away with stuff, and he was a cheeky chappy. And I actually think that made him a lot more relatable to the masses than it does this idea of the fact that Meghan Markle made the royal family more relatable because of her ethnicity, etc. I don't know your views. Maybe people think differently to me about that. Perhaps they could have done both. There's an option, isn't it? Maybe they could have done both of those things at the same time. But alas, no. Harry, to me, and this is in response to Mark's wonderful email, thank you, Harry, to me, does seem, I think you're right, Mark, a bit confused about all of this. Why is that? Well, I suspect that's maybe because critical race theory and relentlessly trying to pigeonhole people and psychoanalyse someone's unconscious bias is a very, very difficult thing to get your head around, because to me, a lot of it just doesn't really make that much sense anyway. And it must be unusual for Harry to almost have to question absolutely every single thing that he's ever had to do in his life, every lived experience, every thought he's ever had, all of that stuff. He must now be questioning and thinking, well, was that founded in some unconscious bias? Was I thinking that because that was planted in my head at birth by being a royal family, as opposed to just living his life? As opposed to just being able to be free and easy and thinking, well, no, maybe I thought that because that's how I thought at the time and I don't anymore. I think the world is now an incredibly confusing place to Harry, and possibly for a chap who was born into luxury, was probably told what to do and what to wear, apart from that one time, all of his life. Maybe now he's with a woman who does exactly the same for him, and maybe that isn't the best thing for him. Keith says, unconscious bias is a gift to professional victims who are desperate to identify bigotry where there is none. Keith, thank you very, very much. GBViews at gbnews.uk. Keep these views coming in. We will do some other news very shortly. But you are with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News. Plenty more still to come. Labour has unveiled a raft of plans to scale up the economy. Our very own Liam Halligan will pick through all of that. But now, here's your headlines.
Patrick, thank you. It's 3:32, your top stories from the GB newsroom. And we start with some breaking news. The UK Health Security Agency has confirmed that 15 children under the age of 15 have now died from strep A. 13 children have died in England since September. 1 death has been recorded in Northern Ireland and 1 in Wales. Health officials say there's no evidence that a new strain is circulating and that the rise in cases is probably due to high amounts of circulating bacteria and increased social mixing. It comes as pharmacists continue to complain of a shortage of antibiotics. Waiting lists for routine NHS treatment in England have hit a record high. A&D performances are now at a record low. According to NHS England, 7.2 million people were waiting to start routine treatment at the end of October, and just 67% of A&D patients were seen within 4 hours of being admitted. Ambulance response times have improved, but are still more than 40 minutes behind the target time of 18 minutes. The government has defended its decision to open the first UK coal mine in 30 years, saying it still intends on phasing out coal. The Levelling Up Secretary has given planning permission for the new colliery in Whitehaven in Cumbria. Former COP26 President Alok Sharma has labelled the decision a backward step for UK climate action, but Michael Gove says it will create hundreds of jobs. And senior palace sources are denying claims the royal family declined to comment on allegations made in the Duke and Duchess of Sussex's Netflix series. It's understood Kensington Palace did receive an email from a third-party production company, but attempts to verify it received no response. That contradicts a statement made at the start of the programme. In the series, Harry accuses the royal family of a huge level of unconscious bias.
In this family, sometimes, you're part of the problem rather than part of the solution. And there is a huge level of unconscious bias. The thing with unconscious bias is it's actually no one's fault. But once it's been pointed out or identified within yourself, you then need to make it right. It's education, it's awareness. And it's a constant work in progress for everybody, including me,
TV online and DAB Plus Radio, this is GB News. Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2230 and €1.1601 euros. The price of gold is £466.27 per ounce, and the FTSE 100's at 7,479 points.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Dubes & Co. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Dubes & Co.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing. You see, amazing.
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Welcome back, everybody. Now, it's on to some proper news, OK? Enough of that Meghan and Harry nonsense. Anyway, Labour Business Conference 2022 is taking place in London today, with Labour leader Keir Starmer and Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves meeting with senior figures from the business world. Rachel Reeves has also announced her start-up, scale-up plan as Labour announces its ambition to have the UK become a high-growth start-up hub of the world and make Brexit work. With me now is GB News' economics and business editor, Liam Halligan, with On the Money. Over to you, Liam.
Well, I spent the morning at Canary Wharf in London's Docklands, Patrick, very much a kind of, shrine to British capitalism. It was obviously developed in the 90s and the 2000s. And back in the 90s, there was something called the prawn cocktail offensive. That's when the former Labour leader, the late John Smith, the late Mo Mowlam, they went round the City of London, they went to businesses across the UK to say, after years out of power, Labour is now the party of business, we're not going to crash the economy, you can trust us with the public finances. That prawn cocktail offensive worked. It was named after a rather naff prawn cocktail starter that was popular back in the 70s and 80s. You probably never had one.
I'm partial to a prawn cocktail, actually.
Are they coming back?
Trifle died out in the 70s. But anyway, carry on.
Christmas log.
Yeah. Anyway.
But the thing about the prawn cocktail offensive, the Tories made fun of it then and they made fun of it now. It worked. It laid the basis for Brown, Blair, New Labour, and of course, New Labour ended up winning lots of time in office. And there's a new prawn cocktail offensive, and it started big time publicly in Canary Wharf today. Keir Starmer gave a speech, Rachel Reeves gave a speech, and this is what the Shadow Chancellor had to say.
Britain can achieve so much in innovation, in trade and in growth. We have the ability, but we need government and business working together to make the most of that great potential, to spread opportunity far and wide right across the country, and to allow everyone with the talent, the effort and the ideas to see their vision through to reality.
Yes, now, Liam, you actually got up close and personal, didn't you, Rachel Reeves?
I interviewed Rachel Reeves afterwards. We'll be showing that later on GB News. A lot of viewers and listeners may not be aware of who Rachel Reeves is, but they're going to be hearing and seeing a lot more of her over the next couple of years as the general election approaches. She's a former Bank of England economist. She's MP up in Leeds. She's seen by a lot of the business community as a safe pair of hands, somebody who's quite sensible. She's very much from the sort of right of the Labour Party. She talked a lot in her speech and with me about fiscal prudence, looking after the public finances. But she also talked a lot about how the Tories had made a mess of the economy. What we're seeing now, Patrick, we're seeing the Labour Party starting to discipline itself. They've thrown out a lot of the sort of Corbynistas. When you and I were at Labour Party conference, you'll have noticed it was a lot more kind of business-like than it's been.
Quiet, but in a good way.
It's all disciplined. The party can now sniff power, and that's why it is making this approach to business. And I must say, there were some pretty high rollers at this business conference. There was the boss of HSBC UK, the boss of Aviva UK. These are major financial services companies, both of whom spoke from the platform. HSBC was sponsoring the speech. There'll be a lot of cynicism. Labour, they can't make the sums add up. They always end up spending too much of other people's money. That's what a lot of Conservatives will say. But I've also had a lot of WhatsApp messages since I was at this conference this morning from Tory cabinet ministers saying, what did you think?
Really?
What was it like? Should we be worried?
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's interesting. You actually, just very quickly, Liam, you actually quite like Rachel Reeves. Just that's my take on it. The numerous times we've spoken about it, you seem to talk to her and talk about
It's not my job to like or dislike politicians. It's my job to report what they say and then give a professional, hopefully informed opinion. And I've heard a lot of Tories talk her down and say, oh, she hasn't got the charisma to be a top-flight politician and so on. But I think after the sort of ups and downs we've had over recent years in the public finances and so on, a sort of lack of charisma may not be a bad thing in a potential shadow, in a potential Chancellor of the Exchequer. And I've always found her, I'm not here to big her up in any way. I'm here to report as an economist. I've always found her to be certainly well briefed and at one with the numbers and trying to get her head round issues more than, say, other frontline politicians on the front bench of all the main parties. So I think she is somebody who is... I mean, it's absolutely clear when Keir Starmer spoke, if Keir Starmer gets in government, he will be her Chancellor. He mentioned her many times in his speech. They seem to be working as one. I don't detect any particular rivalry between their camps. This is Labour's double act. They're trying to present themselves as grown up. The economy is safe with us, they say, and that's why after this business conference, even though there weren't many specific policies, they're very regimented and disciplined, I do think quite a lot of Tories are noticing maybe we should be worried.
Yeah, there's something to worry about. Liam, thank you very much. Liam Halligan, as ever, our economics and business editor, just bringing you bang up. Oh, and you've got something later. Do you know roughly what time that'll be out? You had to sit down.
After 5 o'clock, I'll be able to bring you that GB News exclusive interview with the Shadow Chancellor. Our first one since the channel began.
Ah, there you go. Good stuff, Liam. Right, yes, Liam Halligan there. Bringing in the bacon yet again. Right, so the government has approved a controversial coal mine project in Cumbria, the first new British mine in 30 years. Something fascinates me about this, because a lot of people on the left originally were like, pro-miners, weren't they, under the Thatcher era, and then now they seem to be against coal mines on environmental issues. But there we go. The Levelling Up Secretary faced backlash from environmental campaigners, here they are, after approving the site. But Michael Gove says that it will create new jobs for the community.
The mine will directly create 532 jobs, which will make a substantial contribution to local employment opportunities, because these will be skilled and well-paid jobs. The employment and the indirect employment that would follow will result in a significant contribution to the local and regional economy, with increased spending in local shops, facilities and services. And in addition, the exportation of some of the coal to European markets would make a significant contribution to the UK balance of payments.
Right, well, a green levelling up agenda from the green benches there in Parliament. But GB News' national reporter Ellie Costello has been covering the story for us in Cumbria. I used to live up in Cumbria. I've got very fond memories of the place. And Ellie joins me now. Ellie, a mixed reaction to this announcement, is that right?
Absolutely, Patrick. This is an issue that has divided Cumbria, the United Kingdom, and indeed the world in the past almost 24 hours. That's since a new coal mine has been approved here in Whitehaven. I'm actually stood in front of the old Hague pit. Now, this was the old coal mine here in Whitehaven. They're dotted all along the coastline here. It's now a museum, but this is a site which is so familiar to so many local people here, many of them employed in this pit behind me for the majority of their life. And speaking to them today, they are absolutely delighted that mining is coming back to Whitehaven. This is a part of the country which has much lower employment levels than other areas of the country. And this new mine that's been announced last night will bring 500 new local jobs and 1,500 estimated jobs along the supply chain. So that's really welcome news for many miners here, and one of them is David Craddock. He's a former miner, and I spoke to him about his reaction to this news a little bit earlier on.
I must admit there was a tear in my eye, but then again there would be. That was the best job I have ever had in my life. I worked there for 20 years, and after that I went away and forged a career with the Royal Mail, where I worked for 27 years, but it wasn't the same. There wasn't the camaraderie, there wasn't the close association. Everybody down the pit knew me and I knew everybody else. You know, it was that sort of work. The coal that they're using, when I left, I thought coal is finished. It was in decline, and eventually I seen the closure of the last mine. and the closure of Opencast, and I thought, that's coal dead. Until I learned now they say there's two types of coal. There's metallurgical coal and thermal coal. Thermal coal's the demon seed and nobody wants to talk about that, but metallurgical is needed to create all those wind towers that they've got 200 feet high of solid steel. And the only way they can get that at present is by using coal and blast furnaces. There are other methods in the pipeline, and I hope they come and put us out of business. But until that day, they need coal.
Well, really popular with the miners here, and also really popular with the Red Wall Tory voters, people that voted for the Conservatives for the first time in 2019. And speaking to people here today, they're saying this is the first time that they have seen levelling up in action, seeing real investment in the north of England, where they say it is so needed. But not a popular decision with everyone, Patrick. We've heard from the environmentalists, we've heard from the green groups who say that this makes us look like hypocrites on the world stage, that we can host COP in Glasgow last year and then open new mines, new coal mines the following year. I was speaking earlier to Carol Wood. She's from the South Lake Action on Climate Change. They've been one of the most vocal groups against this coal mine. I spoke to her earlier about her reaction to this news.
South Lakes Action on Climate Change worked really hard on this public inquiry, and we were able to get a lot of support from a lot of people to participate in the public inquiry. We were pleased it got to that stage, but this is a completely backward step for UK climate action and in fact global action.
Well, the developer of this mine, Patrick, West Cumbria Mining, says it's delighted with this news, and it can now deliver what it calls the world's first net zero mine. But despite this mine being approved, Patrick, it's not the end of this story.
Sorry about this. We're just going to have to interrupt, I'm afraid, very quickly. Sorry, Ellie, sorry about this. We're just going to have to go live now to the Old Bailey. We'll go back to Ellie for the sentencing of American citizen Anne Sekulis, who pled guilty to death by careless driving of 19-year-old Harry Dunn. Let's go.
Hit the motorcycle being ridden by Harry Dunn, who was just 19 years old. He had spent the 27th of August 2019 with his best friend. He was happy. He loved motorbikes. There is no suggestion that he was driving anything other than entirely properly. He was on the right side of the road, driving perfectly normally. Excessive speed was not involved on either side. At the point of the collision, there was a slight bend and rise in the road. The impact with the front of your car threw him onto the front of your car and then over the top of it until he landed in the road. His bike caught fire and was pushed backwards. Another driver arrived soon afterwards and called the emergency services. You got out, realised what had happened and were very distressed. You spoke to Mr. Dunn, who was conscious and speaking. You got your children out of the car and called your husband and the RAF base. You confirmed to the police that what happened was your fault and you had been on the wrong side of the road. A breath test was administered and was negative. You said you had made a mistake. Mr. Dunn suffered multiple severe injuries. He was very gravely ill when he was taken to hospital, and he died soon afterwards. You were not arrested at the time. You did not remain in the United Kingdom. You left on the 15th of September 2019. You submitted to a voluntary interview with the police in Washington, D.C. on the 28th of October. As you had at the roadside, you admitted you were responsible. A request for your extradition was submitted in 2020. It was denied. Immunity from criminal prosecution was claimed for you by the government of the United States of America and accepted by the British government. As the High Court of Justice in London found in its judgment on the challenge of Mr. Dunn's parents to that decision in the Crown on the application of Charlotte Charles and Tim Dunn against the Secretary of State for the Foreign and Commonwealth Affairs and the Chief Constable of Northamptonshire Police 2020, EWHC 3185 admin, you did indeed enjoy that immunity at the time of the accident which killed their son. There is no doubt that the calm and dignified persistence of these parents and the family of that young man has led through 3 years of heartbreak and effort to your appearance before the court and the opportunity for you to acknowledge your guilt of a crime. Eventually, you were charged with death by dangerous driving by written requisition pursuant to Section 3 of the Crime International Cooperation Act 2003. Changes in the law wrought by Part 8 of the Criminal Justice Act 2003, by the Police Crime Sentencing and Courts Act 2022, guaranteed powers, or rather granted powers, to the criminal courts to permit a person to take part in criminal proceedings through a live link. The Chief Magistrate granted a live link order, and you appeared before Westminster Magistrates Court on the 29th of September 2022. Your case was sent to the Central Criminal Court. By participating in video link proceedings at Westminster Magistrates, you surrendered to the court. When your case was sent for trial to this court, you were given unconditional bail. Surrender to this court was accomplished when you were identified as being present again by video link on the 20th of October 2022. You were arraigned and you pleaded guilty to a lesser offence, that of causing death by careless or inconsiderate driving, contrary to Section 2B of the Road Traffic Act 1988. The court granted a live link for your arraignment because, in my judgment, it was in the public interest for you to be able to enter your plea, and it would not defeat the interests of justice if that was accomplished by you participating through a live link. At no point in these proceedings had it been suggested that you were not free and able to travel to this jurisdiction in person. Once you had pleaded guilty and were therefore a convicted offender, there could be little reason in a case where a young man had met his death for you not to be required to attend at court for sentence. Your bail was not withdrawn, and you were released from the court but directed to attend in person for this sentencing hearing. I directed you to attend and observed that attendance in person would be strong evidence of remorse. For the purpose of Section 6.1 of the Bail Act 1976, you had a duty to surrender to the court. Failure of a defendant in a criminal trial to attend in person when directed to do so without reasonable cause is an offence contrary to the Bail Act. It has the potential to affect the court's ability to administer justice by damaging the confidence of victims, witnesses, and the public more generally in the effectiveness of the court system. Judges have to consider taking appropriate action if there is no sufficient justification for a failure to attend. The usual action is to issue a bench warrant not backed for bail, which will result in the arrest of the defendant when they are located. Your sentence is due to take place on the 1st of December. A week before that date, on the 24th of November, the court received a renewal of the application for you to appear by live link. This included references to harassment and threats you and your family had received, mainly by social media, and many emanating from the United States of America, and an assessment that this gave rise to a risk to your personal safety if you travelled to the United Kingdom. It did not include any reference to a barrier imposed by the government authorities to your travelling to London to face sentence in person. As a consequence of what the court received, I asked the prosecution to provide a response to the material submitted. Very swiftly, by the 28th of November, the Northamptonshire Police compiled an operation which set out in detail 4 plans by means of which your safety could be protected if you were to return to the jurisdiction to be sentenced. Accordingly, I maintained my order that the hearing be in person. However, a request was made on your behalf for a delay of a week to obtain further evidence. This was allowed. On Friday, the 2nd of December, a statement was served from Amy Jeffries, your attorney, who accompanies you today, and I granted the application on Monday, the 5th of December. The reasons were that for the first time in these criminal proceedings, a barrier to your attendance emanating from the American government was relied on in support of the application. In her statement, Ms. Jeffries says, quote, "The US government does not in any way support Mrs. Sakoulis's appearing in person at this hearing. In fact, Mrs. Sakoulis's US government employer has advised her not to return to the United Kingdom in person for this hearing because her return could place significant US interests at risk. This advice was communicated to her by her employer on the 30th of November, and she is not at liberty to disclose the communication itself or any further information to the court." By Section 51, subsection 3 of the Criminal Justice Act 2003, as amended by Section 200 of the PCSCA 2022, a sentencing hearing falls within the list of eligible criminal proceedings for which the court has the power to make a direction pursuant to Section 51, subsection 1. And that power may be exercised in respect of a person who is outside the jurisdiction of England and Wales. But the power is subject to Section 51, subsection 4A, which requires that the court is satisfied, amongst other things, that it is in the interests of justice to make the direction. The interests of justice in a criminal case are frequently different to the interests of the defendant. Respect for the law must be genuine and effective, substantial and real. The Lord Chief Justice has provided the courts with guidance which must be considered alongside all the circumstances of the case, in particular factors which are set out in Section 51, subsection 6 of the CJA. One of those factors is the need for the defendant to attend in person. Paragraph 9 of the guidance issued by the Lord Chief Justice invites attention to such factors as the potential penalty to be imposed, and in paragraph 18, whether a live link would risk damaging international relations so as to be contrary to the interests of justice. When sentence is to be imposed for an offence that involves a fatality, there must be a strong public interest in the offender being before the court in person. In other words, a need for the defendant to attend in person. As will become apparent, I concluded, provisionally and subject to hearing the submissions and mitigation today, that the barrier presented by your adherence to the advice given to you by your government employer was relevant to my decision on the use of a live link, and it would not interfere with the due administration of justice given the sentence I was likely to impose. The alternatives would have been to withdraw your bail if you had not attended today. The result would have been a warrant for your arrest, which would have been extant until executed or withdrawn. The issuing of a warrant for your arrest would have been close to an empty gesture, and it would stall progress in this case. Another option open to the court would have been to conduct sentence in your absence, as you are represented by counsel, and the court has material upon which to proceed. It would have been perverse to refuse this video link in these circumstances, and on the 5th of December I granted the application, which remained a joint one by the defence and the prosecution. In an eloquent impact statement, Charlotte Charles, Harry Dunn's mother, has expressed her sorrow at not being able to comfort her son as he lay on the side of the road or in hospital. She is full of regrets. Her other son, Harry's twin, Niall, feels emptiness. The deep suffering of the entire family at the unusual course of events I have outlined has generated the persistence that she and Harry's father have shown. She wants justice for her son, as she promised him. Although they've been left with a gaping hole, the family is determined to provide a legacy for him in projects to help others. Who are you, Anne Sekulas? You are a citizen of the United States of America. You are 45 years old and happily married with 3 children with your husband and children. He left the base shortly before you, and according to the material before me, you decided to drive home the way he did, even though you were less familiar with it than another route that you knew. You have expressed your condolences to Mr. Dunn's family through a statement read by counsel on your behalf at this hearing. Causing death by careless or inconsiderate driving, contrary to Section 2B of the Road Traffic Act 1988, can be committed in various ways. Sometimes a moment's inattention can lead to tragic results. This is not such a case. You drove along the wrong side of the road for much more than a moment, and you did not realise what you were doing, even when you were coming to a bend in the road, when all drivers on a narrow carriageway would naturally check that they were driving safely. It seems to me that your conduct, albeit careless rather than deliberate, falls at the other extreme. Taking everything into account, your behaviour on this occasion was not far short of deliberately dangerous driving, which results in a death. I bear in mind that this was a short period of driving and you were not familiar with English roads. The Sentencing Council guideline places the starting point for sentence for your offence at 15 months custody. The range it provides is 9 months to 3 years custody. The death of Harry Dunn is, of course, the highest degree of harm. But that is inherent in the charge and the starting point of 15 months. There are none of the aggravating features that may appear in some such cases. For example, you were not driving uninsured. There is mitigation in your case. In particular, you were not compelled to submit yourself to this charge and these proceedings, but have chosen to do so. You had only limited experience of driving in this country. You offered assistance to Mr. Dunn at the scene, and you have never personally denied responsibility for his death. Other features, such as the short time you drove before the collision, also alleviate the gravity to a degree. You are to be treated as of good character, apart from 2 minor driving matters in 1997 and 2006, both of which resulted in fines. Anyone who has caused death by driving would be expected to feel remorseful. But remorse is important for sentencing purposes, and I accept that you felt and feel genuine remorse. These features require a reduction in the starting point, and I allow 3 months. You indicated a guilty plea to this offence in the Magistrates' Court, and you entered your guilty plea at the first opportunity in the Crown Court. The law requires a 1/3 discount to recognise this. The shortest term of imprisonment commensurate with the seriousness of the offence is therefore 8 months imprisonment. It follows that the offence is so serious that neither a fine alone nor a community sentence can be justified for it. imprisonment must always be the last resort. Your offence passes the custody threshold, as I have indicated, but before deciding that no alternative is appropriate, I have considered whether that can be avoided. I ordered a pre-sentence report at the last hearing. You will have seen that report. The author has provided me with a great deal of useful information about you, and she has consulted senior officers and officials at His Majesty's Prison and Probation Service. However, the author concludes with no recommendation to the court and state that her inquiries do not reveal any practical way in which a form of community sentence or any other non-custodial disposal imposed by this court could be managed in the United States of America. It is obvious that no enforcement can be carried out and no breach of an order could be prosecuted effectively while you remained abroad. Equally, no restorative justice process can take place except in person. I'm grateful to the Probation Service for the inquiries they've made. Counsel on your behalf has submitted that sentence should be deferred and that you would arrange to do some form of voluntary work in recompense. I do not consider that there is any purpose in deferring sentence. As the pre-sentence report makes clear, you are not someone who needs rehabilitation. You need to be sentenced, and then both you and the family of Harry Dunn can move on. If I were to impose an immediate custodial sentence, then you would be unlawfully at large thereafter, and I would order you to return to the United Kingdom to serve it. The sentence will be put into effect if and when you enter the jurisdiction and surrendered to a police station. Before doing so, I have considered whether it is possible to suspend the sentence. You have the strong personal mitigation I have already summarised. You are also a mother of young children who would suffer disproportionate harm from your immediate imprisonment, and I am satisfied that appropriate punishment can be achieved without immediate custody. Please stand up, Mrs. Sakoulas. You are disqualified from driving for 12 months for the offence of causing the death of Harry Dunn by your careless driving. The sentence is 8 months imprisonment, suspended for 12 months. There will be no additional requirements. The sentence means that if in the next 12 months you commit any offence, whether or not it is of the same type for which I'm sentencing you today, you would find yourself before the court again, and it is likely that the sentence will be brought into operation either in full or in part. Thank you very much. You may sit down.
Okay. All right, yes, OK, well, you were watching and listening to the sentencing of Anne Sakoulas there at the Old Bailey. Just to summarise very, very briefly, she is now disqualified. This is obviously in relation to the death, the tragic death of Harry Dunn outside RAF Croughton in Northamptonshire. Disqualified for driving from 12 months and received an 8-month custodial sentence, suspended for 12 months. Of course, she remains in the United States, so essentially largely unenforceable. You are with me, Patrick Christys, right here on GB News. We were just hearing there that sentencing of Anne Sakoulas, the American woman who pleaded guilty to killing Harry Dunn with careless driving. But now it is time for a quick break.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me at 11 on GB News for Headliners, in which I'll be joined by 2 of the UK's top comedians discussing tomorrow's papers. If it's an important story, we'll cover it, but we'll have some fun along the way. Headliners, the late-night paper review that won't send you to sleep like the others will. 7 nights a week at 11 p.m. on GB News.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
Welcome back, everybody. It's just gone 4:15. You are with me, Patrick Christys, right here on GB News. And coming up this hour, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex are dominating the headlines after the release of their Netflix docuseries. Harry and Meghan have used their Netflix documentary to hurl more damaging allegations at his nearest and dearest, only a matter of months after our Queen's sad death. We'll have a reaction to that series throughout the afternoon, from royal experts to ordinary Brits as well. Plus, American woman, as you had just been hearing, actually, and seeing, indeed. Ansakoulis has been sentenced now after she pleaded guilty to causing Harry Dunn's death by careless driving. We'll bring you up to date with the latest on that very, very shortly. And the government's investing £5 million into speeding up the immigration hearing process. That's in a bid to improve the processing times of those seeking asylum. What does all of this really mean? Will it actually scratch the surface? Does it mean that we just end up with a lot more people here? Or actually, does it speed up the deportation process? We'll pick through all of that with you very, very shortly. But as always, we want to hear from you. Let's keep it Harry and Meghan related as well, maybe a bit on that immigration stuff. GBviews at gbnews.uk. Have you watched it? Have you not watched it? I want to know from you. I have not watched it, so I'm picking through it with a whole host of royal experts, etc. But yes, back to that breaking news now, though. First and foremost, before we get stuck into Harry and Meghan, it's proper news, really. Ansakoulis, of course, has just been sentenced. This is the US citizen who's been sentenced after admitting to causing the death of 19-year-old Harry Dunn due to careless driving, and that was in August 2019. She has declined to attend court in person, and that was, it must be said, on the advice of the US government. The nature of her employment there has more than a lot to do with it. And GB News reporter Alice Porter is with me now, live from outside the Old Bailey. Alice, thank you very, very much. Look, a lot of our viewers there will have listened and watched exactly what happened in terms of the judge's sentencing and the summing up, I suppose. But you were there, really, for all of it. Just bring us up to speed, please.
Hi there. Yes, we heard some victim impact statement from Harry Dunn's mother, who documented really the emotional impact on the family of her son's death, and she said that she is on antidepressants, that Harry Dunn's twin brother has been at times suicidal, and it was incredibly emotional scenes in court. But actually Anne Sekulis herself appeared via video link and was herself actually crying on the video link from Washington DC. But the judge, when she was summing up in her comments, criticised Anne Sekulis for not attending in person, which was very much the hope of Harry Dunn's parents. But as you were just saying there, that was advice on the US government that she shouldn't be attending in person. The judge presiding over this, Mrs. Justice Chima Grubb, has given her sentence of 8 months imprisonment, which is suspended for 12 months, and said she is disqualified from driving for 12 months. But all of this is completely unenforceable because she is in the US, and there is, of course, the jurisdiction here in the UK does not extend to that. If she was to come here to the UK and hand herself in, those were the remarks from the judge, then some sort of sentencing could begin. That's obviously not going to happen, and the US government has advised her not to come here. In all likelihood, she never will come here. So in some ways, I think it's, I suppose, a loss for the parents in some ways. They were very much hoping there might be at least some sort of community service order, and that was the understanding that initially she was charged by the CPS by causing death by dangerous driving. She pleaded guilty to the much lesser charge of death by careless driving. Now, the prosecution were very much hoping that she would get, said what she had done was very much sort of one-off, fell one short of death by dangerous driving. We're hoping for a much more significant sentence, particularly in terms of having some sort of community-based service, which she had said that she was hoping to do. But the judge presiding over this did take into account a number of mitigating factors, such as the fact that Anne Sekulis, she wasn't speeding at the time of the offence. It was a genuine mistake that she went onto the wrong side of the road. Of course, being an American citizen, she drove onto the wrong side. It was a total accident. She has always admitted her guilt throughout the whole process. Some of the aspects from the US government were not in her control. Of course, she had no control over the US refusing the extradition request from the Home Office. And she said because of those mitigating factors and because of the fact that she has 3 children and that those 3 children need her support, that was why she gave the sentence, which is, I think, in many ways just sort of symbolic. And she praised the persistence of Harry Dunn's parents, their calm persistence to try and get justice for their son, who died more than 3 years ago. So this has been very much a long time coming by the parents who the mother of Harry Dunn, Charlotte Charles, had said that very much on Harry Dunn's deathbed, she had said, made a promise to him that she would fight for justice. So I think at least today we get some sense of resolution for the family, but I think there will be disappointment that this sort of sentence that's been imposed, of course, is not legally binding, and I think there'll be a disappointment from the family in some respects that she won't be actually really serving any time in either in prison, which we weren't really expecting, but neither in the community either.
Alice, look, thank you very, very much. Alice Porter there, who is joining us live from outside the Old Bailey after the sentencing of Anne Sekulis, who, as we all know, sadly killed Harry Dunn outside the RAF base there. Lots of reaction flooding in as a result of this, and a lot of people getting in touch, quite angry, really, I suppose, well, about the situation as a whole, but also really about the show of justice, but without any real justice. That nature of Anne Sekulis' job, which is, essentially Secret Service type stuff over in the US, means that realistically she's not actually going to face any kind of prison time over here. Just to sum it up, she's disqualified for driving from 12 months, 8 months custodial sentence here in the UK, which she's obviously not going to serve, suspended for 12 months. It's important to stress that she was under the advice of the American government definitely not to actually return to the United Kingdom. Supposedly did show a lot of remorse, but a lot of you, and I won't read out all the comments because it's a bit morbid, let's be honest, but a lot of you getting in touch to just express your condolences to Harry Dunn's family. His mum there apparently in court said that she was, Charlotte Charles, to say that she was, deeply, deeply upset. She's on various different types of medication, as it were. This is according to what she said there. As a result of this, as one would imagine, that's only natural, isn't it? And Harry's twin brother Niall apparently feeling close to suicidal. These was in the victim statements that were read out there, and so nothing really will, of course, bring proper justice for that family. But that is the latest. Nonetheless, disqualified for 12 months driving and 8 months prison sentence, suspended for 12 months for Anne Sekulis. Look, You are with me, Christys, on GB News. We're going to move away from that when we come back, and we're going to be returning to all of the reaction to Meghan and Harry's new Netflix tell-all. Make sure you stay with me for all of that. Again, your emails are coming in thick and fast. I have set my stall out on this. I have not watched it. I do not intend to watch it. I am yet to cave in. I don't need it in my life, OK? But we will be talking about it nonetheless, so I'll be being educated about all the fallout of this from a whole host of royal experts. We have paid, apparently, a whole load of GB News staff to go to a cinema, watch this back to back to back. Not enough money in the world could convince me to do that. gbviews@gbnews.uk. Get those emails coming in. When we come back, I think we'll all just get very, very angry about Harry and Meghan.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison? I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents. Whether you're with us on TV, radio or online, every morning it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and tune-in apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
OK, now, a little bit of a change of speed. Today is the day we've been graced with the release of the first 3 episodes of Harry and Meghan's explosive docu-series. Were any of us expecting this when they said they were stepping down as senior royals for more privacy? They protected their privacy by going about as public as physically possible. There's no end to the revelations in the Sussex's best bridge-burning effort to date. They supposedly tell all about Harry's childhood, despite the fact, of course, that we did kind of live it with him. Meghan's race, which is relatively straightforward, their love story and their frustration with the media. I have managed to avoid this like the plague for the vast majority of the time. I've certainly not watched any of the episodes so far, but I am, along with the rest of you who've also managed to avoid it, now going to be treated to a little snippet of it, so let's just get this over with.
Paparazzi used to harass us to the point of where we had to be forced into smiling and answering questions to the travelling press pack.
Could you look at this camera, please? Just look at this one. I've got a limit. Brilliant.
And that made me feel really uncomfortable from the get-go.
Can you look this way? Hello.
You're right, easy. Bitches, you're right.
Hello. Can we do something different?
And then the deal was we put our skis on, then they'd then leave us alone. Well, yeah, some of them would. But then the other ones would just then follow us around, either taking photographs or waiting for an accident to happen and then put out their cameras. So it was never fair, it never worked.
Yeah. No, I mean, to be fair, it does look absolutely abysmal, doesn't it, at that luxury ski resort? Let's cross now to our royal reporter, Cameron Walker, who is watching it for us all morning from the GB News' reaction room. Cameron, you know, acutely aware that you're now in front of a camera, and I just wanted to make sure before we start, is that OK with you?
That's absolutely fine,
Okay.
Patrick. Yes, that
Good.
is my job. That's
Good.
what I've paid to do, and arguably the royal family are, you know, paid to do what they do as well as being working members of the royal family. But of course, that clip which Prince Harry was referring to there was on a luxury ski break with his mother, Princess Diana. But since then, it's been 25 years since Diana's tragic death, and the rules around media intrusion, and particularly paparazzi, has changed. And Prince Harry alludes to the fact that Meghan effectively had the same kind of treatment of the press as Princess Diana did 25 years ago. Well, I'm joined now by former royal correspondent Nicholas Owen, who was covering around that time in the 90s, weren't you, if you don't mind me saying so?
No, that's fine.
Yes, and the rules have changed since then, haven't they?
Yes, the rules did change. I think everybody realised that we couldn't go on as we were. If we think about particularly the death of Princess Diana 25 years ago, it was basically caused by paparazzi chasing a car in which Diana was travelling, a car driven, of course, by a drunken driver, as we all know now. But the fact that he was putting his foot down with them in his rear view mirror, that really led to her death, and everybody realised that had to stop. But I think here we're getting a bit. This word media is being thrown around, the words paparazzi, and we need to separate out who is doing what and how the royal family are covered. I think really what is bugging, if that's the right word, Harry and Meghan, is the behaviour of the tabloid newspapers, really. Although we see clips of them with cameras in the background and people jostling and so on, there's not nearly as much of that as there used to be, and there was an actual official agreement that there would be less of it.
Sure.
And that really has held. There's always going to be a few paparazzi photographers around, you know. That is the nature of life, and not much you can do about that. It's the tabloid newspapers. And I think that is really where Harry, if he's got a complaint, that is where he seems to be aiming his fire. And it seems to me, watching this stuff today, so much of it is rather fuzzy about what exactly the references are about. What exactly are we supposed to draw? What sort of lessons? What is Harry aiming his darts at? And one thing I would say, I want to be clear about this, talking about the media and racism in the same language, I just do not see that. I do not understand how that can possibly be the case. When Harry and Meghan got together, it was a terrific, lovely fairy tale story, and the tabloids covered it accordingly. This idea that at some stage they suddenly turned on her for whatever reason, racism, and that's a total puzzle to me, I have to say.
Yeah, well, Prince Harry and Meghan go on to talk about being parents themselves, bringing up Archie and Lilibet too. And Prince Harry talks about not making the same mistakes as perhaps his father and mother did, as Prince Harry sees it. So let's just have a little look at what Prince Harry said.
Equally, what's most important for the two of us is to make sure that we don't repeat the same mistakes that perhaps our parents made. I think most kids who are the product of divorced parents have a lot in common.
Nicholas, divorced parents have a lot in common, quote from Prince Harry there, not making the same mistakes that his parents did. Is that a bit of a dig at our new king?
Well, I suppose one could see it that way. Let's be honest, 3 out of 4 of the Queen's children got divorced. There's so much of it about in society generally. Actually, the rates are beginning to go down quite significantly. Yeah. And but for him to aim at his father, which is what he's really doing here, it seems to me to be pretty unfair. Okay. I mean, I can't put it any clearer than that. Is he? Every generation wants to not make the mistakes of the previous generation. There's some wonderful stuff over the years about the way, you know, parents do the best they can, then they make mistakes, and then you say, oh.
Okay. All right, look, we are just cutting that short because, as I understand it anyway, the family of Harry Dunn have now emerged from the Old Bailey, outside the Old Bailey. So we are going to whiz over to the Old Bailey now, where we can hear from the family of Harry Dunn, I believe.
As well, before we take questions. Look, our real enemy here is not Mrs. Sakoulas. We know she made a mistake that night, and I dare say all of us and everybody watching at home has made mistakes on the road. We know she didn't intend to kill Harry. Our real enemy here is the US government, who after Harry's death, instead of coming to do the right thing for this family, decided to kick them in the stomach and continue to kick them in the stomach for 3 years. And if it weren't for their friends, their community, you guys in the media, and the great British and American public, and millions of people around the world helping us, they would have got away with it. Well, they didn't get away with it today. We all heard the judge's criticisms of the US government. The cowardly approach to ensuring that justice is done here, I think is appalling. And I don't understand why the Americans have behaved this way. But as Isaac will come on to tell you, we finished this part of the campaign today, but we are absolutely determined to make sure this never happens to another British family again. Thank you. Isaac.
So thank you for being here. I grew up with Harry and Niall through nursery, secondary and primary school. Harry was a great person who was very caring and was taken too soon, driving perfectly safely on the right side of the road. The way that the US government has treated with this family with utter disdain, all the family wanted to do and all Charlotte was interested in was to hear an apology and a mere explanation as to what happened. She never wanted to take Anne Sakoulas away from her kids. And a message to the US government from the younger generation is, you're not our friend. This is not how allies treat one another. This has turned into a massive international dispute, but I've spent time with the family every day, and what they have to go through on a daily basis is awful and unacceptable. But this is not an isolated incident. The US government are treating many families like this around the world, as much as they try and hide it. And I would just encourage you to watch this space, as me and my team will focus on exposing them and fighting them on every corner. And thank you very much.
Yeah, well said, well said. Right, we're happy to take as many questions for the parents as you like. We've got a bit of time, so Lisa, do you want to go first? You guys, if you want to step forward.
Charlotte, Tim,
step forward.
Lisa from Sky News.
Yeah.
How are you feeling?
Job done. Promise complete. Properly complete now. You know, Anne Sakoulas has a criminal record for the rest of her life. That was something that, you know, she never thought she'd see, the US government never thought that they'd see. And we've worked tirelessly and relentlessly to make sure that she, in the end, still had to do what you and I would have had to have done. So, yeah, Harry, we done it. And we're good, we're good.
Are you happy with the sentence?
We would have been happy with anything. We've never been invested in what the judge was going to hand down. For us, it was just all about doing the right thing, getting through the UK justice system, and done.
Yeah.
Mrs. Sakoulas says she's prepared to meet you if that would help. How do you feel about that?
Too much, too little, too late, I think, isn't it? Job's done now. Yeah.
That ship sailed.
Yeah.
You have a chance to do the right thing. You do it at the beginning. You don't wait for 3 years and put families through torture and then try to do the right thing when it's going to make you look good. It's up to them. But if that, you know, I've reached out an olive branch to them many times. It's never once been accepted. And, you know, look, it's up to the parents, but my advice to them is we move forward now. She will have to live with what she's done and the way that they have treated this family for the rest of their lives. We have to live without Harry, but our conscience is clear. And yeah.
Can you reflect, Charlotte, what you told the court in your victim impact statement? What this has done to you as a family?
Really? Thanks, Lisa. Brokenness. You know, everything I said in that statement is 100% true. You know, and some. You know, you can never put into words how bad things are. But you have to keep going. You can't give up. You know, we have to show Niall and the other children that actually, do you know what? We can live our lives again somehow. We've got to try and figure out how we do that. You know, we've all got therapy and everything in place, and we are hoping that with an awful lot of help around us, including our family and friends, that we'll get there. We'll do it, you know. And our family and friends have been extremely affected as well. You know, they're all quite a few family members and friends who are pretty poorly too, after having watched everything in the last 3 years and a bit. You know, it's devastated many lives, not just us parents and the siblings. So it was hell reading it, absolute hell. I knew I wasn't going to be able to do it without breaking, but it had to be done.
Can you tell us your thoughts, how you feel?
OK, all right, well, look, that was, anyway, the reaction from Harry Dunn's family. We had the spokesperson for the family. We had one of Harry Dunn's friends, and indeed his twin brother's Niall's friends there. And, of course, I think, arguably most emotively and certainly most importantly, really, his mother giving her emotional testimony about the impact, not just for her and the immediate family, but the wider family that all of this has taken. It's been 3 years of hell, she said, and the knock-on effect that it's had is just vast, whether it's to do with the mental health crisis that they're now all suffering, or whether it's just the general level of grief. Well, we've been covering that trial here for a very, very long time, and if you are just joining us, it is because the sentencing has just dropped. That was at the Old Bailey earlier. Anne Secoulis, who is the woman responsible for causing Harry Dunn's death through dangerous driving, disqualified for 12 months, 8 months. A prison sentence is 8 months, but it's suspended for 12 months. Clearly, there are massive issues at play there when it comes to the nature of her job in the United States, working in Secret Service over there. She was essentially banned by her bosses from coming back, although she did, of course, as we heard, express remorse. With me now to reflect on that sentencing is Malcolm Fowler, criminal solicitor, advocate and legal commentator. Malcolm, thank you very much. Look, I'm going to reflect the views of what's going on in my inbox here in front of me, which is a lot of people saying this is kind of sham justice. They don't really think that this is right. Look, I'm very sympathetic towards that, of course. It is a very complex case. I'm hoping you might be able to run us through it, because realistically, she wasn't going to get extradited to the UK, was she, Anne Secoulis?
Well, no, absolutely not. However limited our time, and thank you for asking me, I must say that I join in with the sympathy and the admiration for the family, and in particular the mother, because as a result of her perseverance, first of all, a type of justice has been meted out. And in 2020, the loophole that led to her being allowed to leave the UK in the first place was in fact sealed. And that would not have happened, candidly, unless she had been so persistent. So let's say that, first of all. You're right in that when you speak of the US government's part in all this, for advised not to come to the UK, read ordered. And let's not beat about the bush. That's the reality here. Now, for the type of offence that she had committed, she was arguably on the brink of an immediate prison sentence. Now, that the suspending of that sentence by the judge, and indeed the generosity shown there, recognising that she'd behaved correctly from the very first in terms of stopping, being distressed and showing remorse. All of that counts. And she pleaded guilty at the first opportunity available to her to the less serious charge, serious though it still is. But that might very often have been coupled with some sort of restorative justice. And for example, she might have been required to do unpaid work for the community. But for glaringly obvious reasons, and this is the frustration for the family, and indeed for the community at large, if I may broaden it out, the frustration here is that it would have been unenforceable for her to have been subject to any such sentence that might be added to a suspended sentence of imprisonment. Now, of course, the frustration further is that this suspended sentence of imprisonment, should she reoffend, would not, in fact, apply, and the normal consequences of a suspended sentence with a further offence could not follow. However, what the judge said, and here, surely this is just good law and common sense, was in effect that it could not be in the interests of any community, and certainly not in the interests of justice, for her family and Sir Koulis's family also to be, if not destroyed, then severely damaged, in addition to what's happened to the Sir Koulis family. Forgive me, the Dunn family.
Look, Malcolm, thank you very, very much for that. Malcolm Fowler there, criminal solicitor, advocate and legal commentator, just reacting to that breaking news that you saw on your screen just a second ago, which is that Sir Koulis, who, of course, is responsible for the death of Harry Dunn outside the RAF base in North Hampshire, disqualified driving for 12 months, 8 months in prison, suspended for 12 months. We heard there from Harry Dunn's family, didn't we, as well? Clearly distraught, but they do feel as though at least they've got some form of justice, even though that's not quite how it makes a lot of you feel. Of course, Sir Koulis will not be extradited to the United Kingdom to actually serve any of that prison sentence, regardless of whether or not it's suspended. Anyway, you are with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News. Coming up, we're talking about the government's plans to speed up the processing of asylum applications. Will it help actually tackle the Channel migrant crisis? Will it help relieve the backlog? Will it take the heat off migrant hotels? Or actually, will it just mean more people come here? But first now, it's time for a quick break. Don't go anywhere.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
There's a guy who went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness, brilliant. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512,
Virgin Media Channel 604,
Freesat Channel 216,
Freeview Channel 236,
and YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio,
with the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
OK, people, welcome back. It's Patrick Christys here on GB News. Now, the government has announced it is investing £5 million into speeding up the immigration hearing process. Given all the amounts of money that we're spending every single day on these migrant hotels, that doesn't sound to me like a lot of money. But anyway, the influx of money is hoped to improve processing times by increasing the hearing capacity of cases to hear up to 9,000 more by the end of March next year. So supposedly 9,000 more cases, and we're already hearing at the minute, by the end of March next year, and the cost of that, allegedly anyway, is £5 million, big ones. Immigration Minister Robert Jenrick has emphasised the importance of this additional money in speeding up the removal of those who have no right to be in the UK and in strengthening efforts of those with a genuine need for help. So, I mean, doing what it says on the tin, essentially, which is just speeding up the whole process one way or the other, the way in and the way out. Craig McKinley, Conservative MP for South Thanet, joins me now. Craig, thank you very much. Great to have you on the show. Some people right now might be looking at their TV screens and thinking £5 million is nothing. We spend £7 million a day on hotels for these people anyway. And given our acceptance rate so far, presumably this is just money to accept even more than we already are.
Well, I mean, any new money to try and speed up the system has got to be good news. But you're quite right. With the Institute of Government put out some figures in June that there are 127,000 cases outstanding at the moment. Obviously, some of them may be just assessed by Home Office staff. But because we've got quite a unique system of lawfare and legal aid, very many of those do take the option to go to the tribunal, the immigration tribunal, which, my information that I've received over the last few months is that it has not been working at full capacity for quite some time. So, yes, £5 million, not an awful lot of money. I'd have thought you'd probably need 50 million to actually get through that backlog. But, yeah, it's a welcome step in the right direction. But we're still left with what is going to be the result of these immigration tribunal when the UK, quite uniquely it seems, accepts 76% of all asylum applications, whereby the EU average is just 14%. And Spain is just 11%.
Well, absolutely, Craig.
That is the real peculiarity in this system.
Yeah, look, there's a lot to get stuck into here about this because we also, it would appear anyway, have a relatively open door policy when it comes to Afghanistan, Syria and Eritrea. Now, yes, there are, certainly when it comes to Afghanistan, various people who will say, well, we have a complete duty. But I would argue, are the security aspects of that being adhered to all the time? We are hearing that there's potentially fast-track security there. I don't really want to play fast and loose with security when it comes to that part of the world. I don't know about you, but you hit the nail on the head there. OK, so £5 million to help facilitate the speedy hearing of 9,000 claims. Well, firstly, we have around 127,000 as a backlog, according to you there. It also, this money doesn't seem to do anything to deter people coming here, and it doesn't do anything to actually solve what we do when we inevitably allow most of them to stay. So £5 million down the drain, some would argue, at the cost of loads more.
Well, I don't think it's money down the drain, but I think we have got some unique problems that we need to solve for ourselves. Obviously, I often blame France because these people have launched from their beaches, and I find it just beyond belief that an advanced nation, with us offering as much help as they need, cannot patrol literally plus or minus 5 miles from Calais, but that's another argument. But, we have uniquely caused ourselves some difficulties. Those very, very long delays in processing, up to 400 days. It seems a far more likely yes at the end of the process than other European countries, even though we're all based on the same United Nations Convention on Refugees from 1951, and all countries are signed up to the ECHR. So that's rather bizarre. Now, what is the low-hanging fruit that I'd like us to try and pick first? And that has got to be the Albanian issue. I've said it repeatedly that Germany and Sweden accept 0 applicants from Albanian applicants for asylum. We obviously caused ourselves a complication with the 2015 Modern Slavery Act. But I did watch with great interest the Albanian ambassador at the Select Committee yesterday, who was confirming what we all know, that Albania is a perfectly safe country, an EU applicant country, it's a NATO country, it's signed up to the ECHR. How on earth have we gotten ourselves into a situation where we accept 55% of Albanian applicants? This is the real madness in the system.
It is. I mean, we could talk about the Albanian issue all day, but just to wrap up, Craig, when it comes to some of the points you've raised there about, yes, the amount of Albanian people that we seem to be accepting and how tolerant we are of that, plus the number of people, the percentage of approvals that we have for asylum claims in this country relative to our European friends, why is it then that the Conservative Party isn't standing up and making more of a deal out of this? Because surely that's a way to actually get around all this. They can say, well, look, hang on a minute, we are really seriously doing our bit, but they don't seem willing to.
Well, this is an overlay of some complicated issues. As you know, we've got the UN Convention. We've got that oddity of the median line in the Channel. I mean, there are no other borders that are really like that. You've got safety at sea. You've got the hangover of the Dublin Conventions and the complete failure of Frontex in the EU and the Schengen free movement doesn't help this either. But, yes, you're absolutely right. There's the type of things that I do speak with Minister Jenrick and Suella, the Home Secretary, on a regular basis, say, how is it we've got such a disconnect in
this is the thing.
It would seem to me we need to get some Spanish judges over here because only approve 11%.
Well, potentially. Look, Craig, thank you very, very much. It's Craig McKinley there, Conservative MP for South Thanet. And I would say that, actually, this is one of the good things of Brexit. And because, hear me out on this, because now there is nothing to hide behind. I thought Craig McKinley was going to veer off in that direction slightly. In a way he did, although I'm not slamming him or anything like that at all. But blame the Schengen area, Frontex, etc. Yeah, all right, OK, fine. But once people have voted for Brexit, it exposes your own national government, what their own interests are of what they're actually doing. And as it currently stands, our own government is not, in my view, really doing anything, certainly anything of significance, to clamp down on the number of illegal immigrants that we're having, to clamp down on the number of net migration, to clamp down on the number of people crossing the channel. And it's very difficult now, it's becoming increasingly difficult for them to start pointing the finger at other people. Yeah, you can point it at the French a bit all day long, but realistically, there's got to be some drive from within. And there doesn't appear to be much of one. And now we're out of the European Union, we have to start looking at ourselves in the mirror a bit more, don't we? Anyway, moving on. Border Force staff at UK airports are the latest to announce their intention to strike over the Christmas period. An easy, lazy joke to be made here about how Border Force have not been policing the Channel, but of course I will not make it. I'm better than that. The PCS union announced the action in a dispute over pay and conditions, with the action affecting passport checks at multiple UK airports. 2,000 to 3,000 employees are expected to take part. With me now is Charlie Ray, former industrial editor of The Sun. Charles, thank you very much. Great to have you on the show. Right, so Border Force staff at airports causing Christmas chaos on top of the other chaos. I hope you don't mind me saying, Charles, we'll remember the last time we had a general strike. How does this compare? How does this compare to your previous experience? I didn't say prehistoric, I said previous experience when it comes to a general strike.
Patrick, how old do you think I am? The last general strike was 21. In 1926. 1926.
The last time we came close to one, that was a Freudian slip. That apologies. Yeah, you know when they're that old. Sorry, but no, seriously, go on.
The only thing we can call a general strike is the TUC. But what we have got is coordinated action by various unions. We've got strikes every day for December. Now, we've got the border staff, the UK border staff have called a strike. It's going to screw up Christmas and it's going to screw up New Year because they've covered those 2 days. Now, we have the ludicrous situation where we've got soldiers on standby who have had between 3 and 5 days training compared to 5 weeks training for border staff who are going to man airports and so forth. They're already on standby to drive fire engines and ambulances. Well, how many soldiers have we got in this country? They keep cutting them back. It is getting ridiculous.
For me, the irony for me in all of this, Charles, is actually that the Border Force staff going on strikes makes it easier for people to enter the country illegally over the Channel and much more difficult for people like you and me to get out of the country.
That's absolutely correct. And of course, we've got to remember the problems we all had at the pandemic when airports were closed down, planes wouldn't fly. Well, we're going to have there's going to be dozens and dozens of flights cancelled. And these passengers, this is what they've got to look forward to. And it's going to be absolute chaos if it goes ahead.
Yeah, some would say, well, it's good news for the British economy in a sense that local cafes and bars might be busy as we're supposed to people tumbling out of them in the Costa del Sol. But actually, is there something slightly self-defeating, Charles, about this? Because if you are damaging the economy to the extent that something like a general strike in name only will do, I mean, the rail strikes alone supposedly costing us 30 million quid a day, right? Then we are already skint during a cost of living crisis. Where on earth do you think we're all getting the money from in order to actually be able to pay for the whopping great big pay rises a lot of these different groups want?
Well, this is the big problem, and the government is faced with a huge problem because if it gives in to, say, the nurses who are demanding between 17 and 20%, then everyone else is going to say, well, hang on a minute, we've got a case to have money. So we haven't got enough money to pay all these demands. I mean, the border staff are after 10% pay rise, pensions, job security, and no cuts to redundancy terms. I mean, that's a hell of a negotiating stance there.
Well, indeed. Right, Charles, thank you very, very much. Charles Ray there, who is, of course, a former industrial editor of The Sun, no less. Right, moving on from that, because you are with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News, and coming up, we've got Liam Halligan's exclusive interview with Labour's Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves. You do not want to miss that. But before that, very quick break.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Dubes & Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Dubes & Kerr.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
My name is Andrew Doyle.
Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Welcome back, everybody. You're with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News. Coming up this hour, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex are making waves with the revelations in their new Netflix series. Harry and Meghan have used the documentary to level more damaging allegations at the royal family. I won't waste time watching it myself, but we will have all of the reaction to the series from those who have bothered. And the government is investing £5 million into speeding up the immigration processing. But will it really scratch the surface? Some people saying it's nothing compared to the amount we're spending on hotels every day. Will it, frankly, just make it easier for people to come and stay here? I want to know all of the answers to that. Plus, our business editor, Liam Halligan, has spoken exclusively to Labour's Shadow Chancellor, Rachel Reeves. We'll bring you some of that, just a little teaser of that conversation very, very shortly. As always, I want to hear from you. gbviews@gbnews.uk. Get those views coming in, people. What's your immediate reaction to the idea that we're spending now more of taxpayers' money too? I'll be a cynic about this. Speed up the ability for people to come to this country and be allowed to stay. I'll just say it. gbviews@gbnews.uk. Oh, and a bit of Harry and Meghan as well if we have to. Anyways, your headlines.
Good afternoon, it's 3 minutes past 5. I'm Ray Addison in the GB Newsroom. The mother of Harry Dunn says her promise to get justice for her son is now well and truly complete, following the sentencing of Anne Sakoulas for causing his death by careless driving. The wife of a US diplomat received 8 months in prison, suspended for 12 months. In August of 2019, she was driving on the wrong side of the road when she hit the 19-year-old and later pleaded guilty to causing his death. Mrs. Sakoulas says she's deeply sorry for the pain that she caused. Speaking outside the court, Harry's mum, Charlotte Charles, praised the verdict.
You know, Anne Sakoulas has a criminal record for the rest of her life. That was something that, you know, she never thought she'd see, the US government never thought that they'd see. And we've worked tirelessly and relentlessly to make sure that she, in the end, still had to do what you and I would have had to have done. So, yeah, Harry, we've done it. And we're good.
The UK Health Security Agency has confirmed that 15 children under the age of 15 have now died from strep A. 13 children have died in England since September. 1 death has been recorded in Northern Ireland and 1 in Wales. Health officials say there's no evidence of a new strain, and the rise in cases is probably due to high amounts of circulating bacteria and increased social mixing. It comes as pharmacists continue to complain of a shortage of antibiotics. Meanwhile, waiting lists for routine NHS treatment in England have hit a record high, and A&E performances are now at a record low. According to the NHS, 7.2 million people were waiting to start routine treatment at the end of October, and just 67% of A&E patients were seen within 4 hours of being admitted. Ambulance response times have improved, but are still more than 40 minutes behind the 18-minute target. The government has defended its decision to open the first UK coal mine for 30 years, saying it still intends on phasing out coal. The Levelling Up Secretary has given planning permission for the new mine in Cumbria. Former COP26 President Alok Sharma has called the decision a backward step for UK climate action. However, Michael Gove says it will create hundreds of jobs.
The mine will directly create 532 jobs, which will make a substantial contribution to local employment opportunities, because these will be skilled and well-paid jobs. The employment and the indirect employment that would follow will result in a significant contribution to the local and regional economy, with increased spending in local shops, facilities and services. And in addition, the exportation of some of the coal to European markets would make a significant contribution to the UK balance of payments.
Senior palace sources are denying claims that the royal family declined to comment on allegations made in the Duke and Duchess of Sussex's Netflix series. It's understood that Kensington Palace did receive an email from a third-party production company, but attempts to verify it received no response. That contradicts a statement made at the start of the programme. In the series, Harry accuses the royal family of a huge level of unconscious bias.
In this family, sometimes, you're part of the problem rather than part of the solution. And there is a huge level of unconscious bias. The thing with unconscious bias is it's actually no one's fault. But once it's been pointed out or identified within yourself, you then need to make it right. It's education, it's awareness, and it's a constant work in progress for everybody, including me,
The Home Secretary says the military is set to replace striking border force workers and protect the UK's borders. Protecting is the number one priority. People hoping to travel over the Christmas period are being warned of cancellations and delays over 8 days of action from the 23rd of December to New Year's Eve. Rail workers, postal staff, nurses and paramedics are also planning to strike in the coming weeks. Well, meanwhile, the British Medical Association has announced that it will ballot junior doctors in Scotland for strike action over pay. The BMA claims in the past 14 years its members have faced a real terms pay cut of 23.5%, and with inflation rising, that will only get worse. The action would take place at the start of next year. The US and Russia have exchanged jailed American basketball player Brittany Griner for a notorious Russian arms dealer, Viktor Bout. Ms. Griner was arrested at a Moscow airport in February for possessing cannabis oil. President Biden says Griner is now safe and on a plane home from Abu Dhabi, where the swap took place. You're watching GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens, so let's get back to Patrick.
OK, it's a truly momentous day because Harry and Meghan have finally been able to tell their story as the Bombshell series has been released this morning. Harry is at pains to highlight the level of unconscious bias in the royal family, while a lot of people were just at pain watching it. Whilst Meghan calls their engagement an orchestrated reality show. And together, they tried to paint a picture of the torment, the utter torment that they've been caused by both the media and indeed members of the royal family. The Duke of Sussex also divulged details about the death of his mother. Let's have a little listen and a look. Just worth quickly saying before we do that, yes, again, just want to emphasise, I have actually not bothered myself to watch any of this. I did realise I was going to be, well, essentially strapped to this chair and made to watch clips like this of it all day, so I thought I'd just react to it live with everybody else. Let's have it.
When my mum died, we had two hats to wear. One was two grieving sons wanting to cry, grieve, and process that grief because of losing our mum. And two was the royal hat, show no emotion, get out there, meet the people, shake the hands.
I think that undoubtedly is the element of Prince Harry's life, isn't it, that we all must have a huge amount of sympathy for. And I think there's been a shift. There's been a shift in the way that royal life was conducted, and there has been a shift in the way that the media has been able to act, frankly, for a very, very long time now. And that, I think we can all agree, must have been incredibly difficult. Obviously, not just the death of his mum, but the reaction to it, having to walk behind a coffin, etc., and being in full glare of the public eye and the press's eye at that time in his life, unquestionably. But then what's happened since? I think, frankly, what's happening now, as he's an adult, is arguably indefensible. I have been shown another clip, which we might be playing later, about Meghan doing a prolonged and very dramatic curtsy and mocking the way that she met the Queen for the first time. And Prince Harry's just sitting there, frankly, looking like a bit of a simp. Like, well, what do I do now? And you think, actually, Harry, was all this Netflix money worth it? Anyway, royal expert and journalist and broadcaster Jenny Bond joins me now. Jenny, thank you very much. You've moved rooms since the last time I saw you. Another fantastic room in what I can only imagine is a superb house that you've got for you there. Jenny, yes, so your latest hot take on this Harry and Meghan stuff. The sympathy there, of course, over his mother's death, undeniably. But what's happening now? He's an adult and he should know better, no?
Well, it was all rather underwhelming, actually. The 3 episodes I watched already do not really live up to the trailers, which were full of explosive suggestions. But this, what we see, is really a story of love. Great love for his wife, and that it's all quite charming and lovely if you want to see that. Of hate, he says the level of hate directed against his wife and his son was extraordinary. Now, there was very little evidence to back that up. Certainly nothing we've seen so far about hatred against his son. And race, because he said from the start he felt that the root of the problem was her race, that she wasn't given the protection that she needed because of her race. He felt that she should have extra protection. So it's a very dramatic story in many ways, but I don't think it's landed as many blows on the royal family as we were led to believe it would.
But what's to come? So am I right in saying there's 3 episodes that are dropped and there are another 3 coming? Is that right?
Yes, yes. It's going to be quite a long watch, really. I don't think we need 6 hours of this, unless you are totally invested in the story of Harry and Meghan. And let's face it, a lot of people are. They are genuinely interested to hear it from the horses' mouths.
Right.
But, you know... 6 hours is quite a lot.
Crucially, Jenny, as it stands then, people like you who have diligently soldiered through 3 hours of this tosh have so far come to the conclusion that there's nothing particularly damaging to the royal family in it, and of some of the allegations that are being alluded to, it's baseless, like the racism stuff so far. So in the next 3 hours, they've got to land a blow, otherwise, frankly, they lose on points, don't they?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's baseless. It's certainly very fuzzy. That's sort of all sorts of generalisations. And I don't think we've learned a lot new, except that they felt very... Well, actually, it's not new at all. They were very unhappy in their royal life. That is a great love story. Oh, they met through Instagram. We didn't know that he was scrolling through Instagram and rather liked what he saw. That's new. And the other new story for me was that when he dressed up as a Nazi... as a Nazi at a fancy dress party, he found that now to have been one of the biggest mistakes of his life, and he subsequently went and met a survivor of the Holocaust. Well, we didn't know that. I've got a lot of sympathy with him on his allegations about unconscious bias in the society in general, and I think they have got a message that we all need to listen to, perhaps, on that.
Yeah, but there are a few things... Well, I mean, there's a lot there. I mean, the idea that we had to go and meet a Holocaust survivor as a result to recognise that perhaps wearing a Nazi uniform was not a great idea to me. The idea that they met on Instagram as well, because we were initially told that it was a blind date, I'm sure. Is there another little whiff of a lie in there? I don't know. But interesting on his unconscious bias things. I only know this from watching a clip we played earlier on. I'm keen to get your views on this. My interpretation of what he said is he started by saying no one's at fault for unconscious bias. So basically, he's essentially absolving maybe his family there of any kind of blame. Oh, they're not out-and-out racist. They just don't realise what they do. And then he goes, but once it's pointed out, you need to be aware of that. He says it's a constant work in progress, even for himself. Well, I suppose they're alluding to the idea maybe that he's potentially trying to sit down his relatives, his father and his brother, and point out all of the ways that they might be unconsciously racist, and they've told him to do one, and he's unhappy about that, maybe.
Well, I do think he's got a point. That is a term that, you know, most of us hadn't heard of, unconscious bias, unconscious racism, until relatively recently. And perhaps we do need to look at our language and the way we just address one another. I think there is a point to be had there. And, he does include himself, which is fairly humble, and says he's on this journey. And I think it's true. Once you suddenly realise you're saying something that you've said for years, which you thought was all right, and suddenly you realise, actually, that isn't quite correct, you do pull yourself up. And he's talking not just about family, he's talking about society in general. And you would love the fact that in, I think it's the 3rd episode, they even bring in Brexit. Yes, they bring in Brexit and say that really fomented the racial hatred in the country and therefore against Meghan.
Well, I mean, it would be fascinating to know Meghan's intricate ideas and a take on the benefits or otherwise of the customs union and single market. I mean, goodness only knows. Maybe in episode 4 we get a little glimpse of the Northern Ireland Protocol. But, Jenny, thank you very, very much. Jenny Bond there, royal expert, journalist and broadcaster. When Harry, I don't know about you, but it's something that I thought earlier on was about when Harry was saying that, unconscious bias is a big thing. he's on a constant work in progress, even for him. And, I mean, the idea for me that he's now, you know, he doesn't want to do the dishes and he gets shouted at, Harry, it's your unconscious bias saying that you're going to leave the hoovering to me. I'm telling you, you know, he must cop it at home, left, right and centre, mustn't he? But there we go. Right, OK, so Cameron Walker joins me now, our royal reporter, who is in the GB News Royal Reaction Room, which, as far as I'm aware, is a cinema. So, Cameron, you have been held at gunpoint. You can't see behind Cameron Walker there. Is that GB News has essentially employed various different people at gunpoint to make Cameron and a whole host of royal commentators watch all 3 episodes of this. They've peeled their eyes open, bless them, and now they've had to do it. Cameron, what's your latest take on all of this that's taken place so far? Then 3 episodes in, and he's still alive.
Well, Patrick, yes, we've watched the first 3 of this 6-episode documentary series. I think the first thing to point out is, of course, that at the very beginning of episode 1, we had this disclaimer from Netflix saying that Buckingham Palace and Kensington Palace have been approached for comment, if they would like to comment on this series, and they didn't want to. Now, according to my sources inside both palaces, that I understand that no members of the royal household or Buckingham Palace or Kensington Palace have been approached for comments. So Netflix disputes that. There's clearly 2 sides to this story. But you played a clip there of Prince Harry talking about his experience of walking behind his mother's coffin in 1997. I'm joined by former royal correspondent Nicholas Owen. And Nicholas, obviously it's clear that Prince Harry, as a child, experienced quite a lot of trauma and is still haunted by his mother's death.
Oh, of course, that's bound to happen, isn't it? I mean, he's caught... when you think about the age that he was, a young teenager, I'll be very honest with you. I lost my mother when I was 8 years old. And in those days, I was kept away. I didn't go to the funeral or anything else. A little bit older, of course, he's much more aware of everything that was going on around him, and then forced to walk behind that coffin with all in full public view and everything else. Oh, yeah, that's going to haunt you for the rest of your days. But I've said this many times, you've got to move on in life, haven't you? We all have to move on in life, and you can't keep, I think, spooling back and trying to blame everything that went wrong on sort of terrible traumatic memories. You've got to sort of put them aside to some extent, surely.
And you mentioned moving on. Of course, it was very clear from Prince William following the revelations that the Panorama interview with Princess Diana was obtained over false pretenses. That interview should never be played again. Now, a documentary with his brother fronting the documentary has played at least 20 seconds of it. Yes. What do you make of that?
Well, indeed. I mean, what can you say about that? Very contradictory, isn't it? And so many things could be said about it. Princess Diana decided that she would go on air and air her grievances. OK, fair enough. She wasn't paid to do it. There was no money changed hands, whatever else our motives might have been. So I think it's very difficult to draw parallels between these 2 things. And Harry talked in this Netflix series, didn't he, about she told her truth, you know. This is, again, surely there is only the truth. And I do not think, really, that this series is giving us anything very clear about the truth from either side. That's my honest feeling about it.
Well, another theme that Prince Harry alludes to in this is relationships, particularly his romantic relationships and their dealings with the media. So let's just take a little listen to what he said.
Every relationship that I had, within a matter of weeks or months, was splattered all over the newspapers, and that person's family harassed and their lives turned upside down.
Relationships splattered over newspapers, as Prince Harry just says there in that clip. Relationships turned upside down. But Meghan stuck through it, didn't she, for the course, and is still by his side, albeit now having stepped back as a senior working member of the royal family.
Indeed. Must remember that Meghan, American actress, lady, very, very used to being in the public eye. In fact, wanting to be in the public eye. I mean, that's what obviously in her profession we're all about. So I don't think it's too surprising that she was willing to stay the course. Whether it ruined relationships along the line, whether the media always came in and, as soon as started writing about it, people sort of fled in disarray. Again, I'm sorry to sound. I keep sounding terribly sceptical about all these things, and
Don't worry.
And old-fashioned. But I do sort of wonder about that. This whole business of Harry saying that other members of the royal family had to go through this, and really you kind of got to ignore it a bit. Well, it is a two-way street. It is a two-way street for all of them. Harry is 5th in line to the throne. 5th. Now, the chances of ever being on the throne, of course,
He's 6th
are very
now,
low.
isn't he?
Or is it maybe 6th?
Yeah.
You correct me. You're probably wrong. Closer to the action than me. But still, he's not that remote. He's not that remote. And after all, the media, the modern media, the way it is played, this is where the royal family's image has to be projected. They need the media. They need the media, and that should never be forgotten. You can't just get by and run it all on your own rules. I think where Harry should be directing his fire, and it's understandable if he wants to do it, is social media. Social media, that's where all the bile and the misery is covered. And if it's racism that he goes on and on about, he and Meghan are concerned about, that is surely the channels that have been used for that. Not the basic media, not the basic media.
Well, perhaps social media might be a theme in the next 3 episodes, Nicholas, because Patrick, I'm afraid you're going to have to sit through another 3 episodes this time next week, because the final 3 episodes are being published on Netflix this time next week, which happens to coincide with the Princess of Wales carol service at Westminster Abbey. So yet another overshadow for the Prince and Princess of Wales.
Yes, good stuff. Look, Cameron, thank you very much, and Nick as well. Great that. And I believe maybe we can unshackle Cameron from his cinema seat now. Free Cameron is going to start trending on Twitter. But just my couple of points on this. Nick Owens, though, I thought made some good points about it being a two-way street. In my opinion, Prince Harry, if he wasn't born into royalty, would probably be stacking shelves in Aldi, and that maybe is doing a disservice to people who stack shelves in Aldi. The only reason he's got a profile and millions and millions and millions of pounds in the bank, the only reason why we get to have to listen to him waffle on and prattle on about things like the environment whilst sitting in the comfort of a private jet on the way back from a polo match, is because of what he was born into. So I think it is a two-way street, isn't it? I mean, I personally would be willing to tolerate a little bit of an inconvenience on a private, or not so private, I should say, a luxury ski holiday somewhere, if it meant that I got that amount of money in the bank. And also, can I just point this out? Do you not think it's a bit weird how Harry and Meghan seem to be doing a lot of filming of themselves during what was supposed to be these intensely private and upsetting moments? I mean, just forgive me here for thinking there's something deeply, deeply narcissistic about the idea that Meghan might be alone in Canada somewhere and pining for a husband or doing her hair in the mirror, and thought, what I'll just do now is take my phone out and record myself being really upset on my own. If that was one of your mates and you walked in on them in the bathroom or in the living room or whatever they were doing, kind of recording themselves crying, do you not think you'd say, are you all right? Maybe you need to get yourself checked? Anyway, there we go. That's my hot take. You're with me, Patrick Christys on GB News. Coming up, our business and economics editor, Liam Halligan, has sat down and spoken to Labour's Shadow Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, about the opposition's vision for the economy. We'll bring you some of that conversation after this very short break.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me at 11 on GB News for Headliners, in which I'll be joined by 2 of the UK's top comedians discussing tomorrow's papers. If it's an important story, we'll cover it, but we'll have some fun along the way. Headliners, the late-night paper review that won't send you to sleep like the others will. 7 nights a week at 11 p.m. on GB News.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Deebs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prisons?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton Tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News.
Frank,
fun, fearless, and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Welcome back, everybody. Some absolutely stellar emails coming in about this Meghan and Harry stuff. We'll return to those later because now it's time for some proper news. The Labour Business Conference has taken place in London today, featuring Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer and senior party figures. The Shadow Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, outlined how a Labour government would work with business to make Britain an enterprising and dynamic nation. And GB News' economics and business editor Liam Halligan, an enterprising and dynamic chap himself, sat down with her to discuss it.
Rachel Reeves, as this wave of pre-Christmas strikes is imposed on the public, the patience of millions of voters could be tested. Could we ever reach a point where trade unions are too powerful?
Look, nobody wants to see industrial action. I do not want to see industrial action. I would urge the government, even at this late hour, to sit down and negotiate with the key workers who are looking to take this industrial action. If you take the nurses, for example, never before have nurses taken strike action.
Is 19% too much?
This is unprecedented, and we've got to listen to why NHS workers feel that they need to take this action. I'm not going to pluck numbers out of the air. Any settlement has got to be fair to those who are working in the sector, but it also has to be affordable to the public finances. But it's also clear that this industrial action is about much more than just pay. If you look at nurses, for example, there's stories of nurses time and time again at the end of their shift not being able to go home because there's no one to pass on to. And that is putting huge pressure on nurses' time and workload and is causing burnout. And it's not just on strike days that we are seeing a crisis in our NHS and a crisis on our railways. It, frankly, is every single day of the week at the moment, and the government need to address these issues in our key public services.
This is very much a pro-business conference. You've been meeting business leaders here in Canary Wharf. You've launched Startup Scale Up, this business-friendly review. The Tories are increasing corporation tax paid by small firms as well from 19 to 25%. Is that business friendly? Isn't it too high?
The government have increased taxes, I think it's now 24 times in the last 2 and a bit years. Why is that?
So it should be less than 25% then.
Let me answer the question. The reason they're increasing taxes time and time again is that the government have failed to grow the economy. The average growth rate in the last 12 years has been just 1.4% a year. Under Labour...
Well, how's high corporation tax going to help that? Isn't it going to lower growth?
Under the last Labour government, economic growth averaged 1.5 times more on average per year than it does today at 2.1% a year. That's why we're publishing this report today, Start-up, Scale Up, to make Britain the best place to start and grow a business.
Well, surely we need lower corporation tax then than 25%.
Well, look, Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng tried this experiment in cutting taxes without saying where the money is going to come from, and it resulted in a huge spike in borrowing costs for government and for ordinary people. So, you know, anyone who wants to make tax cuts has to show exactly where the money is going to come from, and you're not going to get any unfunded tax cuts or spending commitments from me or from the Labour Party.
A new coal mine's being opened in a relatively economically disadvantaged part of Cumbria, as you know. 500 well-paid jobs, 1,500 more jobs in the supply chain. A lot of local people in Whitehaven want that coal mine. Would Labour close it?
Labour's Green Prosperity Plan is about investing in the jobs of the future, in carbon capture and storage, green hydrogen, floating offshore wind and green steel. So we want to create jobs in the energy sector.
So no new coal mines then?
We're not in favour of new...
So you would close the one in Whitehaven?
Well, there's no coal mine in Whitehaven, and I'm not convinced there's going to be one there by the time of the next election, because there will be much opposition, as we already know, to this.
But you would close it if there was one opened. A lot of environmental campaigners want you to say yes.
Well, I would very much doubt that by the time of the next election there is going to be a new coal mine. There will be much objection to this in the community and beyond. We want to create jobs in the north of England, including in Cumbria, but we will be doing that by investing in the jobs and the industries of the future. We've got today a fossil fuel Prime Minister in the age of renewables, investing in the industries of the past rather than those of the future.
Michael Gove, as you know, has asked the Competition and Markets Authority to launch an investigation into what he calls cartel-like large house builders. He accuses them, they would deny it, of restrictive practices, not building enough new homes given the planning permissions that they have. Do you agree with that call for a CMA inquiry into house builders?
It's a bit rich on the government to say that there's not enough houses being built when they've just scrapped their targets for house building. You know, I welcome any investigation in by the CMA to look at how the sector works, but the government needs to do its part by having targets for house building and actually getting Britain building, because home ownership is now out of reach for far too many young people and far too many families. Home ownership is falling under the Conservative government. It's Labour now.
You'll know,
because
I know you're very good with figures. As a former Bank of England official, you'll know that under Brown and Blair, that was when social housing, the building of council houses, really plummeted, right?
Well, Labour's priority in the early years of the last Labour government was to get social housing up to a decent standard, because in the 80s and 90s the quality of council and social housing fell to such a terrible standard, with kitchens and bathrooms that were well past their sell-by date, where you had leaky windows and mould and damp. And that's why we prioritised improving the standard of council housing. But absolutely we need to be doing more to invest in social housing, especially at a time when rents in the private sector are so high and the quality of so much housing is so poor.
And just one final question, if I may, Shadow Chancellor. I do appreciate it. It is a breaking story. We know that there are police investigations for fraud at Unite Union, Labour's biggest donor. It could be that your party's in receipt, Unite would deny it, of criminally gained funding.
Well, I really welcome the fact that the new General Secretary of Unite the Union has done this investigation and has referred it to the police. Sharon Graham, the new General Secretary, has done the right thing. I don't know the details of any of these investigations. I'm sure that police will do a thorough job, and we look forward to those reports.
Shadow Chancellor, thanks for joining me.
Thanks, Liam.
Oh, there you go. Lots for us to talk about there. Liam Halligan, our economics and business editor, will be back the other side of the news. Some big stories there, some big scoops for us to get stuck into, not least about the coal mines, not least about house building as well. We're going to go to your headlines, though, and when we come back, Liam will be with me right here in the studio to pick that apart. Don't go anywhere.
35 minutes past 5, I'm Ray Addison in the GB newsroom. The mother of Harry Dunn says her promise to get justice for her son is well and truly complete following the sentencing of Anne Sakoulas for causing his death by careless driving. The wife of a US diplomat received 8 months in prison, suspended for 12 months. In August of 2019, she was driving on the wrong side of the road when she hit the 19-year-old and later pleaded guilty to causing his death. Mrs. Sakoulas says she's deeply sorry for the pain that she caused. Speaking outside the court, Harry's mum, Charlotte Charles, praised the verdict. A warning for those watching on television, this clip contains flashing images.
You know, Anne Sakoulas has a criminal record for the rest of her life. That was something that, you know, she never thought she'd see, the US government never thought that they'd see. And we've worked tirelessly and relentlessly to make sure that she, in the end, still had to do what you and I would have had to have done. So, yeah, Harry, we've done it. And we're good. We're good.
The UK Health Security Agency has confirmed that 15 children under the age of 15 have now died from strep A. 13 children have died in England since September. 1 death has been recorded in Northern Ireland and 1 in Wales. Health officials say there's no evidence that a new strain is circulating, and the rise in cases is probably due to high amounts of circulating bacteria and increased social mixing. Well, meanwhile, waiting lists for routine NHS treatment in England have hit a record high, and A&E performances are now at a record low. According to NHS England, 7.2 million people were waiting to start routine treatment at the end of October, and just 67% of A&E patients were seen within 4 hours of being admitted. Ambulance response times have improved, but are still more than 40 minutes behind the target time of 18 minutes. The government has defended its decision to open the first UK coal mine for 30 years, saying it still intends on phasing out coal. The Levelling Up Secretary has given planning permission for the new mine in Cumbria. COP26 President Alok Sharma has labelled the decision a backward step for UK climate action, but Michael Gove says it will create hundreds of jobs. Senior palace sources are denying claims that the royal family declined to comment on allegations made in the Duke and Duchess of Sussex's Netflix series. It's understood that Kensington Palace did receive an email from a third-party production company, but attempts to verify it received no response. That contradicts a statement made at the start of the programme. In the series, Harry accuses the royal family of a huge level of unconscious bias. On TV, online and on DAB+ radio, you're watching The People's Channel, GB News. Patrick will be back in just a moment.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. B, I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Welcome back, everybody. Now, before the news, we heard there Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves speaking to GB News' economics and business editor, Liam Halligan. I'm very pleased to say Liam joins me now. Right, there was a lot of very interesting stuff in that. The first thing that stood out for me was about coal mines.
Yeah. Just to say to viewers and listeners, look, it was a 5-6 minute conversation. I'd really like to sort of sit down and quiz the Shadow Chancellor for 20 minutes, half an hour. Labour just aren't in that mode at the moment. I had a very strictly regimented 5 or 6 minute slot. I mean, it's great that GB News got to do the interview. We've been wanting to sit down with the Shadow Chancellor for a long time, so chapeau to her. But if it feels a bit short and truncated, that's why. I just don't think... Labour are in kind of holding pattern mode at the moment. They're not wheeling out their policies because, quite frankly, the way politics works, the Tories nick them, right? That's how politics works. But I think it was interesting what she said on the coal mine, because Michael Gove, this morning, it was confirmed he's approved the building of the first coal mine in the UK for over a decade, and it's up in Whitehaven in Cumbria. It's for coking coal, which is used as a raw material in steel, of course. And this coal mine will provide 500 local, highly paid, very well-paid jobs, and around 1,500 jobs supporting the activity in the coal mine. And Michael Gove, Levelling Up Secretary, of course, he's taking a lot of stick for it. And it's interesting that actually quite a lot of people in the locality want the coal mine. There are some that don't, and of course protesters have travelled from far and wide to denounce the idea of a new coal mine in Cumbria because it goes against the sort of green agenda. But quite a lot of people, local people, do want it because it provides jobs for their kids and their grandkids and so on. It's very interesting that, given that quite a lot of working people want that coal mine, that Labour said, the Shadow Chancellor said, we don't want any more new coal mines. So if it's the Greens versus working people, and that's a simplistic division, but Labour is definitely going for the Green vote rather than this kind of blue-collar vote.
Yeah, which actually really is fascinating.
Yeah.
It's quite a juxtaposition, isn't it, in the past, of course. I mean,
which is one reason why Michael Gove approved it, because he kind of gets that. He kind of gets that. But it's interesting, there's no hesitation. We don't want any more new coal mines.
Yeah, no, fantastic stuff. And yes, that, of course, will be out and about. We'll be able to watch that online as well, won't we?
Yeah, so the full-length interview, we just played it on your show. Thank you, just before the break. But it's on GB News Facebook page, GB News YouTube channel. I'll also be tweeting it at Liam Halligan.
Yeah, well worth a watch and a listen to that as well, because it wasn't just about the coal mines. Of course, there was loads in there about housing, etc., etc., etc. So, yes, make sure you tune in. A really good insight, actually, into where Labour are at the minute. Liam, thank you very much. Liam Halligan there, our economics and business editor. Right, OK, we've not got long left to rattle through a couple of big ones, actually. So the government could be set to rely on hundreds of armed forces personnel to stand in for border force officers at airports during 8 days of strikes over the festive period, and potentially to cover for ambulance drivers as well and firefighters as well. Speaking earlier, Home Secretary Suella Braverman outlined the government response to minimise disruption for the public.
Well, we have been preparing for the prospects of border force strikes for some time now. We've got plans in place that will involve, to a degree, bringing in some of our military colleagues to help us in a variety of roles. And we want to, I mean, ultimately, I'm not willing to compromise on security at the border.
Well, I mean, there's very little to compromise on, isn't there? There isn't any security at the border. It's just a porous border. But anyway, there we go. I do hope, by the way, that the people who are in the military who end up getting roped in because of all these other people going on strike get paid the wage of the people that they're covering, if that wage is more, because I suspect it probably is. But anyway, there we go. But all the plans, of course, to call in the troops have been met with fury by some senior military figures. I'm not surprised. So, should we be using our armed forces like this? I mean, the short answer is no, but I suppose who else have we got? Anyway, joining me now is Major General Chip Chapman. Thank you very much. Chip, I mean, presumably the armed forces are just pretty angry about the whole thing. I mean, everyone goes on strike. I mean, if I went on strike, well, I don't know, maybe you'd be presenting the show.
I think the problem is, Patrick, that they embedded military aid to the civil authorities in both the 2015 National Security Strategy and the 2021 Integrated Review. And when Iraq and Afghanistan stopped, there were very forward-leaning senior officers who wanted to get involved in this space. And that's why we're in this position. So, you know, you get what you pay for. And so it's a bit late for them to be saying this now when they've been wanting to do this for years and really started to do it when they wanted to get involved, in particular, in the Olympics in 2012. It's not to say that we haven't done this recently, because, of course, we have. There was a thing called Op Prismed in 2015, or October 14 to January 15, which was ambulance driving. Last year in September, there was a thing called Op Escalin, which was to do with making sure that the fuel supply was running. So the military role is there to do it. And in security terms, there's also a thing called Tempora, which we saw rolled out in 2017 with the terrorist attacks, where there are 3,800 people who are noticed to move. The thing for the Army and the armed forces, because the split is generally 40% Army, 30 RAF, 30 Royal Navy in this, is that it's really bad for morale at Christmas. It's probably retention negative, and you'll see a lot of people signing off in the future. But of course, it's a centralised force. It's there for the government to use if it wants, and the government take the view, certainly under the Conservative government, that the sunk costs are there. They've already paid for the military.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot here, isn't there? Not least the fact that, as you've just said there, the Army don't, well, I suppose maybe literally they do sign up for this, but they don't really. You take what I mean when it comes to the Army, don't really signing up for this. The morale at Christmas as well. The potential anyway, even just on paper at least, of it being a bit of a security issue, the idea that we've got a lot of our Army or RAF or Navy or whatever requisitioned into doing something else. Some people, however, would say that maybe, just maybe, the Army and the military can show the other people how it's done in some respects as well and do things more efficiently.
Well, they can certainly, in this case, thicken the response, but they cannot solve it. So what they would probably do if it was, for example, a fire strike, is that they would absolutely prioritise and only go in life-saving situations. They wouldn't be there to get Mrs. Meghan's cat out of a tree. That would probably be the same under the ambulances.
Just quickly, Chip, sorry. It's only because I've only got about a minute max left with you. I just wanted to get this in. The basic rate of the Army, I know it's a sliding scale, but the kind of average individual who'll be roped in to go and cover for a border force worker or an ambulance driver or something, I don't know, are they on less money than those people that they're covering for?
Yeah, they probably are, but you give up certain rights when you join the armed forces, and one of those, of course, is the right to strike. And in a constitution such as ours, civil control of the military means you go where the politicians jolly well tell you to do so at the end of the day. Worth concluding by saying that defence core outputs will still be maintained. Air and missile defence in GB and NATO, the nuclear deterrent will be maintained, our posture in Estonia and Poland against the Russians. So core defence outputs will still be maintained.
Major General Chip Chapman, thank you very, very much for joining us on that about the military being roped in at, well, I suppose at the cost of morale and all of that stuff and potential retention going forward as well to cover for people going on strike. There is surely a deep-seated irony here, ladies and gentlemen, isn't there, I think, of people being roped in to do a job when they're less well paid than the people who are going on strike to do it. But anyway, there we go. Let's get now, obviously, a view on a different topic, because the government has announced that it is investing £5 million into speeding up the immigration hearing process by increasing the number of days that tribunals can operate, so up to 9,000 more immigration and asylum cases will be heard before the end of March. You can see on your screen there what looked like a giant Portaloo coming across the channel. Well, there we are. But will it make a real difference to the build-up of cases, or is it just too little too late? Joining me now is Conservative MP for Buckingham, Greg Smith. Greg, thank you very much. The cynic in me says this is £5 million on top of the £7 million we're already spending every single day for these migrant hotels, that might actually just facilitate the smooth transition of various different people across the Channel and into British society indefinitely. It's not stopping the root cause of them coming here, is it?
You're right to highlight that. I would say that this initiative announced by the government today is a good one for getting the asylum cases through the court system a lot quicker. We know that a huge part of the problem that we've got, the reason that we are spending such a hideous amount of money every single day to keep those seeking asylum who have come here illegally in hotels, is frankly the failure of civil servants and those processing it to get them processed quickly enough. We had those shocking numbers of only 1.4 a week by each caseworker a few weeks ago. This hopefully will get people through the court system, assess their asylum application and get a yes or a no on it very, very quickly. But there's lots more that we need to be doing. I was in with the Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, this week, stressing how urgent it is that we've got to get the Bill of Rights through the House of Commons to ensure that it's British courts that judge what our laws say, like the Rwanda Partnership, not courts overseas. And we've got to get really, really tough and ensure that people understand that if they're people traffickers and smugglers, they're not going to get away with it anymore. Today's announcement is just the start, but we've got to go much, much further.
I get that. Greg, could the Conservative Party be doing a little bit more to emphasise that actually they've only got a couple of years now to get this stuff through? And people might argue that it's not quite as dramatic as the future of Britain depending on it, but when it comes to various different things like having more of a say over our borders, etc., really, they've got a couple of years to get this through. Otherwise, if Labour win at the next general election, well, it's not going to happen, is it?
Well, you're absolutely right. The clock is ticking. We've only got a limited amount of parliamentary time before the next general election. The Bill of Rights is probably going to be controversial, particularly down the House of Lords end. So we're potentially into Parliament Act territory on it, but we've got to do it. We have got to assert that it is British courts and British courts alone that can judge our own laws. The Rwanda flights couldn't take off because of courts overseas telling us we couldn't do it. We need to get the Nationality and Borders Act properly into force, and the only way we can do that is by more legislation, I'm afraid. And you're right, the clock is ticking.
Greg, it's good to know that there are at least people like you trying to push the envelope when it comes to this stuff. Greg Smith, thank you very much, Conservative MP for Buckingham, just whizzing you through the latest when it comes to, well, I suppose, a potential fast track when it comes to approving or rejecting asylum processes. Right, up next is Michelle Dewberry, the wonderful Michelle Dewberry, with Jubes & Co. And as ever, she's here in the studio. Michelle, what you got coming up?
Hello, Patrick. Yeah, we've all noticed by now, haven't we? It's freezing cold outside.
Freezing cold in here. I don't know who keeps turning the aircon on. Sorry, anyway.
Well, I've got to be honest, I've dressed sensibly. I've got a vest on and thermal tights, Patrick. So, heat the human, not the herm. That's what I say. But anyway, I digress. Anyway, well, you've thrown me off my train of thought now. Right. Oh, yes. How much help should the government give to people, particularly pensioners? Some are saying that the government is just blanket giving pensioners too much help without means testing it. Many people are saying, get out of it. The pensioners have contributed their whole lives and they're entitled to this help. So I want people's thoughts on that. Type 2 diabetes in young adults is rising the fastest in Britain than anywhere else in the world. Why and who should be responsible for it? Is it the individual or should the government be doing more? I've got strong views on that, I can tell you. And I want to look at the coal mine. Was it the right decision to open it or not? An IPP sentence is basically where you get a minimum term but not a maximum term. Some people are saying it's time to show mercy on those people, about 3,000 of them in prison, and let them out because capacity is at a premium. I'm not sure I'm convinced on that one, Patrick.
No, me neither. But I'll tell you what, I will be watching, though, because it sounds fascinating. Thank you very much, Michelle. Michelle Dewberry there with Jubes & Co. Next. Look, thank you very much, everybody who's been watching and listening to me, Patrick Christys. I will be back again at 3 p.m. tomorrow. Well, hopefully there's a little bit less of the old Meghan and Harry stuff. We had to do it, though, people, didn't we? We had to do it. Big news day for the old Harry and Meghan issue. Right, make sure you stay tuned, because Michelle and her thermal tights will be up very, very shortly. I'll see you tomorrow, 3 p.m. Thank you for watching.
Hello again, I'm Luke Mile with your weather forecast. As we head through Thursday night, a very cold one on the cards for many with a sharp frost, and we keep the risk of snow and ice. That's because our air is coming down from the Arctic, a very cold air mass. You can see the blues flooding the map there, and that will give us the risk of some very cold nights, particularly as we go into the weekend as well, with the risk of freezing fog. But back to the here and now. Through this evening, we've got the risk of ice across parts of West Wales, the southwest of England and eastern counties of England. These are the areas we've seen showers through the day. We've also got a snow and ice warning in place across Scotland. Temperatures sub-zero under those clear skies, perhaps as low as -8 or -9 out in the countryside. For many, though, there will be some sunshine as we start the day on Friday. A few mist and fog patches around and a bit more cloud for London and the southeast of England. But this will soon start to ease away.